No. Just wait for more people to join the live. Wait, is my microphone on? Yeah, it is. Yo, Alvin, what's up? It's good. Uh, Instagram Live. Wait, so Reggie was on Instagram? I didn't even know that. Yeah, I didn't know Reggie was on Instagram Live. I might have to watch that back if he shared it anyway. Yo, what's up, Jonathan? Yeah, to be fair, Alvin is always here. He's always showing up for the live streams. That's facts. That's facts. 3 days ago. Oh, so many people have been in like casuals lives. There was like many different ones. So there was a guy who was like an engineer, and then before that there was a guy who was in the military. So which one are you? Candice Owens. What did Candice Owens say? I have no idea what she said. Let me search for that. Let's see. Yeah, I have no idea what Candice Owens said. I'm very sure she would have said something stupid, but we'll see. I'm from the States and just curious, would you say the system is just as bad as the USA in case of policing? Um, so the UK is bad, but it's not as bad as America. No way. I don't think anywhere in the whole entire world has police as bad as the USA, to be fair. Oh, so you're the engineering student. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was there. I was there. I definitely watched that live. What do you say? George Floyd shouldn't be painted as a martyr because he was a criminal. Okay, so this is the first thing. So when you commit a crime, you're not supposed to be killed regardless if the person's a criminal, if they're not. And by law, everyone has the right to a free trial, especially because there are situations where people are painted as criminals and then it comes out that they didn't actually commit the crimes they were convicted for and they're actually innocent, which is why to kill someone explicitly for the reason being that they were a criminal makes absolutely no sense. And another reason why a lot of black people get mad at the whole George Floyd situation is because literally you see like, okay, so when we talk about like white guys, for example, if we think of like if we think of people that shoot up schools or people that you know that who was that guy who in Las Vegas he like shot hundreds of people. Um, those guys who are armed and dangerous, they find a way to get those guys in handcuffs and give them a fair trial. So why is it that a black guy who was not armed didn't resist arrest? Why is it that he in particular he gets killed? Or why is it that in those situations those people get killed, but you can put someone who's shot like 100 people in cuffs safely? So all that says is that black lives are valued less. Oh, that's what she said. Oh, okay. Wait, so Candace Owens, what'd she say? George Floyd shouldn't be punted because he was a criminal. Wow, that's insane. Yeah, Candace Owens is always saying rubbish. I think she's brainwashed. I'd assume the system is worse in Europe against the Muslims and those who look the part. Is that true? I can't speak for the whole of Europe. I know in other parts of Europe it's probably worse. Like in terms of Europe as a whole, England is not the worst out of all the European countries, but I really don't know because I'm not Muslim, so I don't really know what the experiences of Muslims are. I'd have to bring on someone who is Muslim from Europe. Um, I really don't know. We all want Hood Bayer to come back, but unfortunately, Shane Oliver has been saying Hood Bayer is going to come back for how many years in a row. So at this point, I'm just going to wait till it comes. It might never even come back at this rate. What's this guy say? I don't understand why people don't get it. Nobody's talking about if he was a bad guy or not. It's about, yeah, exactly. It's about how the situation was handled. It's not about the person. It's really not about the person. But that's honestly why I'm doing this live stream, because an issue I've had with, let's say, black people in general is they are very quick to criticize people, but they never take the time out to explain racism or to just let people ask them questions that they've always wanted answered about racism and stuff. So that's where I come in. That's the whole point of this live stream. We don't only have to talk about racism, but hopefully that's the main topic of discussion of this live stream. How bad is racism more generally in the UK? So in the UK, there's racism in all facets. As a black person, I'm not scared that a policeman like in America is just going to shoot me for no reason. However, there's many cases of black people getting wrongly convicted, misidentification, racial profiling by the police, statistics that don't make sense based on race. It's also like very systemic in terms of like they don't let black people in certain jobs or in certain roles, so they don't have a lot of power in society. And also, if you have an African name in England, you're very likely not to get a job. So someone like me, I'm kind of happy I have an African name because it means that any job that I'm accepted to, they really want me, because most times I have like black friends who have white names and they'll have amazing credentials, like first class degrees from like Cambridge, like all this type of stuff. And their name will be like Jack Jones. And then the employers think they're white. So they're like, yeah, we saw your credentials. You're amazing. We're going to invite you for an interview, yada, yada, yada. And then my friends go to the interview and then they realize that my friend is black. And they're like, oh, sorry, actually, we don't have a place for you anymore. Someone else has gotten the job. And it's just crazy how things like that happen. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's as overt as America, but then it depends on where you are, because when I say England, I'm thinking of my point of view, and I've only really lived in like major cities. If you go to like a village in England, it's racist as hell. Like racist as hell. Like almost as bad as America. I saw a video where cops were handcuffing store owners that were trying to catch the looters. What the hell? Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, cops are brain dead. American cops are brain dead. Does black only mean African American? What do you refer to a person with African heritage? In England, in Europe, black people are just black people. There's no such thing as like British African, or we don't really do that. What's my opinion on the protesting going on for as long as it has? So the thing about the protest is, because this stuff happens over and over and over and over again, and people have tried to protest peacefully. You see people like Colin Kaepernick, who took a knee, and people had so much issues with it. And when black people protest peacefully, like what Colin Kaepernick did, which was just take a knee, people take offense to it. And then when people are, okay, that doesn't work, let's like see a different way we can protest. And then people still have a problem with that. So I think it's a situation where people have realized that all these short, silent protests don't work. So people have taken it into their own hands to like be a bit more violent. Now, I don't really condone violence. I don't really condone looting either. But however, you have to show empathy in the fact that people are being killed for no reason, and protesting methods in the past haven't worked. But even if we go into like the looting stuff, I can talk about that forever because I feel like there's like a government agenda to that, because I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but like police are starting the looting, and police are like literally planting bricks in random places. So it's like they're trying to instigate looting so then they can use that as an excuse to like arrest people and stuff. So the whole criminal justice system in America is so corrupt beyond measure. Like it's just insane. Let's see. Yo, shout out to Trinidad. The solution to combat police brutality is basically there should be consequences for police brutality. The problem is like the only way you can solve anything is to have a consequence. So a good example is in every country let's talk about like traffic lights. So the whole point of traffic lights is to help drivers, because if you have traffic lights, it means that the road, like what's the word for it? Not parallel. What's the opposite of parallel? It literally skip adjacent. So the road adjacent to the road you're driving, right, is so when you stop, then this light is green, and that causes people not to crash. So actually, the invention of things like traffic lights was to make sure that drivers are safe, which is quite funny. But the funny thing is, even though the whole point of traffic lights is for the safety of pedestrians and drivers, if you don't police it, if there are no consequences for passing a traffic light, like fines, taking your driver's license, going to jail, people, even though that is designed for the safety of human beings are so stupid that they won't even follow it. So you have to have consequences. So with everything in this life, for it to, I don't know, be fixed, there always has to be a consequence. And right now, with police brutality, there is no consequence. Like police shoot people almost all the time for like no reason, and especially in America, and there's no consequence. So they're just going to keep doing it. Whereas if we said, okay, now there's actually an offense. If you kill someone and you didn't kill them rightfully, which means that your life wasn't under threat as a policeman, the charge is 20 years in jail. People would still be brutal. Policemen will still be brutal until there's actually cases of like at least 5 or more people that do 20 years in jail time. And then you'll start to see it changing. So with everything, there has to always be consequences. Because humans are so dumb, going back to the traffic light example, that even when something is put in place to help us, without consequences, we still go against it. That's how like dumb humans are. It's Keisha, YouTuber, has a video about how her experience in a Brandy Melville. Interesting. I personally find people saying that they can't understand is sort of a cop-out. Nobody asks you to understand. We don't want you to understand. We want you to recognize it's happening and change it. Totally true. Very, very true. Okay, so what'd she say? She was walking in the store and opened her bag to get her phone out, and the store person walked to her and asked what was in her bag. Wow. That's crazy. That's insane. Should white people protest about Black Lives Matter? Yes, they should. So a lot of people think that like Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group, and the response to the whole Black Lives Matter thing and people being adverse to it is, in every single group in this world, in this life, there's always going to be a bad apple. And a lot of people, their argument is that, well, this person who claims to be part of Black Lives Matter, they killed a police officer, so Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group. Well, that's one bad apple in a movement that consists of more than 1 million people worldwide. That's so dumb. That's the same way as saying, that's as dumb as like saying there are a few people in America who have gone to schools and shot everyone up. That means every single white person is a school shooter. Therefore, you can't trust any white person because they might shoot you at any given time. That's dumb. Like, you can't take an example of a minority and then use that to represent the majority of people that are for the movement. So when talking about Black Lives Matter does not mean that all lives don't matter, like people like to say. The whole point of Black Lives Matter is that when looking at society right now, it seems as if people behave like Black Lives Matter least, or the way people navigate life is as if Black people don't matter, or their lives aren't worth it. And that's why when a Black person's life is taken, no one really cares. But say a white person gets killed, you'll see the uproar and the uprise. So honestly, that's the whole point of Black Lives. It's just trying to like put Black lives in a point where it's seen as a normal life that is valued like everyone else's life. It's not about trying to be higher than anyone else's life. It's just trying to create a level playing field. So yeah. What's the worst racism you've experienced? I've been spat in my face, had a radio thrown out my car at my head, been punched by 2 skinheads on the underground. I faced a lot of racism, but it's not really overt. Like, obviously, I've had people shout the N-word. So many things, man. The worst racism I think I've experienced in my entire life was in school. This is a long story. So let me tell you guys actually a really deep story, right? So I'm not sure how many of you guys know this, but I lived in Africa for 6 years. So my native country is a country called Nigeria in West Africa, and I actually lived in that country for 6 years. And I will tell you guys the reason why I moved to Nigeria. So basically, in school, everyone knows this, right? When you get bullied in school, what do people say? Report to the teacher, right? So I was always a goody two-shoes. I wanted to live by the book. So when I was in primary school, so I must have been like 4 or 5 years old, I used to get bullied by these 2 guys, right? Now, I knew I could beat them up, but because I was such a goody two-shoes, I just took it and I was like, nope, I'm not going to fight back. My parents told me not to fight back. So I'm going to go to the teachers and report to the teachers. And what do the teachers do? They bring us into this room, they talk rubbish for like 1 hour, and then they write their names in this black book that doesn't mean anything. And then the next day I get bullied again, and then I report, and then the same thing, they just write in this black book. So the kids realized that them bullying me, there was no consequence to it, which meant that they just kept doing it. So because of that, my parents had to take me out of that school and take me to a different school, right? So the old school I went to, so I'm from I grew up in Southeast London. So the old school I went to was called Lee Manor Primary School. You guys can search it up if you want. So I went from Lee Manor to Baring Primary School, right? So when I was in Baring Primary School, another group of bullies started bullying me. So once again, I'm trying to live by the book. I'm trying to do what my parents told me to do, what everyone says you're supposed to do. So what do? I report to the teachers and I say, these guys are bullying me. Please, can you do something about it? This is the whole reason I went to this school in the first place, because I left my last school because of bullying. And same crap. They just talk rubbish in this room for 30 minutes, write their name in the book, and then you continue to get bullied. And it's just a cycle. So one day I decided that if I keep putting up with this, especially because, first of all, I was like, I knew I could beat these guys up, but I just took it because I wanted to be a good person. I wanted to actually abide by the school rules. But I just realized that if I'm probably going to get beaten till I die if I'm not careful, because these guys are not going to do anything about it. And they say they will, but they don't. And I just keep getting beaten every day and taking it. So I decided to take matters into my hand once in my whole life, once. So what I did was, this guy was trying to bully me. This guy called Frankie. And so this specific day, he asked me, what did he ask me for? He asked me for something anyway. I think he wanted to take my lunch or something. So at this point, I had decided in my mind, I'm not taking this anymore because the teachers are not going to do anything about it, right? So what I did was he punched me in the face because I said no. So I got really angry and I smashed my knee into his face and broke all his teeth, right? And then, so obviously he went crying to the teachers. This is someone who has been bullying me for like years. He went crying to the teachers. And now this is where the racism comes in, because when white people get into fights, just like this white person had been bullying me my whole fucking primary school, and I had to leave my last school because these two white guys were bullying me, right? They just chat shit in this room and just write some crap in a book that doesn't mean anything. But I fought once in my life, and it wasn't even for no reason. It was because my back was against the wall. Teachers weren't doing anything about it. And I had to defend myself because I'm not going to get beaten every day for no reason. So in this specific instance, I need this guy in the face, and his teeth happened to break. And then because of this, right, the school decided that because I got into one fight that I must have mental issues. So what this school did was they hired a psychiatric doctor to start having appointments with me at school to make sure that I was mentally stable, right? Now, the issue with this, because the psychiatrist that they brought was actually Indian, because most of the medical staff in the UK are Indian anyway, or like Sri Lankan. So there was this Indian psychiatrist, right? And I remember it was literally like it was yesterday. I must have been like 8 years old at this time. And I remember this woman having a discussion with my parents. And basically, the discussion was basically like, there is nothing wrong with your kid. I'm a psychiatrist. He was being bullied. All he did was defend himself. But the way the system works, if you keep letting me have appointments with your son, legally, if I have up to 20 appointments with your son, then it's going to go on his record legally that he is mentally unstable and he had to see a psychiatrist when he was younger. And that's going to affect his future for Lord knows how long, because every time he applies for a job, it's going to flag up that he's mentally unstable. Everything he applies for, he won't be able to be a teacher because you can't take care of kids if you're legally seen as mentally unstable. And basically, this Indian psychiatrist was basically saying that this is like one of the systemic racism things that they do, and that affects, like, they only do this to ethnic minorities where they get psychiatrists in for like no reason. So because of that reason, my whole family had to make the executive decision that I had to move to Nigeria so that I would be in a different school to where the psychiatric doctor wouldn't see me, and therefore I wouldn't have on my record that I was mentally unstable because I got into one fight. So in terms of like the biggest racism I've experienced, literally, this racism was so bad I had to move countries. And that's actually the reason why I lived in Nigeria. So I was in Nigeria from the age of 9. So I moved to Nigeria when I was 9. And then I came back to England when I was like 15. So that was actually the reason I went to Nigeria. So that is like how deep the racism in England runs. Like, that's when I say it's like systemic. So it's even worse than like people saying, calling you the N-word or stuff like that. It's deep. It's like as deep as them calling a psychiatrist for a black person getting into one fight. Yeah, I was being bullied by these white guys and nothing ever happened. But I got into one fight and they wanted to like affect my life for the rest of my life. So I had to go to Nigeria because of that reason. So in terms of like the worst experience I've faced, I'd say it's that. That's definitely it. But I'm very sure I'm really, really behind the comments now. Wait, let me see if I can catch up. Had a mum ram her prom into my legs and then pointing at me to her 3-year-old and say, "That's what the hell? That's crazy." Fun facts: Garen Morgan, an African American. To be fair, like, yeah, that's facts. That's facts. That's facts. Do you think rubber bullets will ever be used properly, or shouldn't be used? I think rubber bullets should only be used in situations where a person is clearly posing a threat to police. But I think people just use rubber bullets to disperse people especially when people are like protesting peacefully, which makes no sense. What's your take on brands not necessarily just fashion profiting off a minority through imagery, but not helping by giving back? I despise it. And I know so many brands that do it. I'm not going to mention brands in this live stream because there's so many, it would take me forever to go through them. But yeah, I hate it. Like I've even worked for companies that do that. So I'm not even going to expose them today, maybe in the future, but yeah. I'm now refraining from using the term cop when referring to Western Europe and USA has grown with slavery, so you should forgive, but you must not forget. Oh yeah. Well, ultimately, I have loads of white friends. I don't inherently think that all white people are racist. In fact, the last thing I think when I look at a white person is they're racist. However, I'm very cognizant of the whole the whole doctrine that has been taught to people in terms of racism and how that could be passed down to people's kids, whether they mean to or not. So I'm cognizant, and I always do point it out when it does happen. What's your opinion on brands creating clothing saying they're in support of Black Lives Matter? I'm only a fan only if they're actually from the community and 100% of the profit goes to donations. I think you can only judge people by their previous action. So when people talk about all this Black Lives Matter stuff and like all this activism, I don't even think of anything to do with what they're doing now. I just think, okay, this person, what have they done in support of Black people before this situation? And that tells me if they actually support it or not. Because that means they've been supporting it before it was like popular or before it was like a big topic to where you have to look good for PR to basically say we support Black people. So people like designers like Kobe Jean Raymond cannot be questioned when it comes to his support of Black Lives Matter. So if he makes a t-shirt and sells it, it's not because he's trying to earn a profit, and he's shown that over the years. So I might have taken international school for granted. Since going to one made me realize how stupid racism is. I was always exposed to different cultures, hence why I can never have racist views. Yeah, facts. I think one thing that does help in terms of racism is if you grow up around in a multicultural setting. So like, for example, I grew up in London. So in London, there's white people, there's Asians, there's Black people, there's Latinos, there's all types of people. So everyone has seen everyone. I know white criminals, I know white geniuses, I know Asian criminals, I know Asian geniuses. So when you live in such a multicultural area, you realize that people are just people and you judge people as separate individuals. However, when you've grown up in a white area and all you see is just like Black criminals on TV and just what the media pushes, it makes sense why those people then end up thinking all Black people are criminals. So one way to kind of educate yourself in terms of racism is to expose yourself to people of different cultures. International school probably had mad racist students. Don't it depends on where your international school is, to be fair. It depends. Is it wrong that some brands / designers don't hire Black / Asian because the designers wanted their clothes in specific race models? So honestly, it depends. It depends if the like inspiration of so this is how I feel. I feel like you can only do it two ways. There's only two ways you can do it. So you can either be the type of designer that you want the inspiration to be true and very culturally specific. What that means is that if the inspiration of your collection is about, I don't know, Portuguese history, then it would make sense if a designer says, I only wanted to have Portuguese models in this runway because it kind of contributes to the fact that the references to this runway were actually from Portugal. That makes a lot of sense. However, that means you have to keep that exact same energy when you take inspiration from like Asia. So if you take inspiration from China, which a lot of designers do, and you've said in the past that The only reason why you have all white models on your runway is because you're referencing European culture. That's fine if you keep the same energy. And when you reference Chinese culture, all your models are Chinese. Or when you reference African culture, all your models are African. But the issue is, every designer I've seen personally, that their reasoning is, I only have white models on my runway because like the inspiration of this collection is European, which makes a lot of sense, but they don't keep that same energy when they take references from elsewhere, which makes their opinion redundant. So I would rather designers stop lying to themselves, and they either keep the same energy, or what they do is they just have a mix of different cultures on every single runway, regardless of where the references are from. That would make sense. So you can either do either or. You can't just say, there are only white models on my runway because I'm only inspired by French culture, and then one day you have literally, and I've seen it so many times, I won't mention names, then you have a collection that's only inspired by Chinese culture, and then there's no Chinese models on the runway. Like that just makes you a hypocrite. Have you ever had the fear of not getting home safe because you're black? I have, and I'm black myself. I was born and raised in London, but ethnically Nigerian. Oh yeah, 100%. 100%, 100%. 100%. I feel like I'm behind. Wait, hold on. Avoid wearing Hawaiian shirts as a protest, and race war instigators are infiltrating protests and wearing these shirts to identify each other. Oh yeah, that's true. I saw that. Yeah, he said the psychiatrist understands. That's facts. That's facts. It's actually such a deep reason why I actually moved to Africa, because it was literally just me. Like the rest of my family, like my sister lived all her life in England. Yeah, respect to the psychiatrist. If I ever find her, oh my God, I need to thank her so much. If I ever find her. Yeah, I know. That's just life though. That's life. Everything happens for a reason. Do you think racism is more prevalent in EU countries? I'm not sure if you were here when I was explaining like the reason why I actually moved to Nigeria, but you can watch the live stream back. But I just think the racism in Europe and the racism in the US is just different. But what I will say is racism, the concept of racism, it comes from Europe. Like Europeans invented racism. So that's all I'll say. Even white Americans are actually Europeans, because if we think of history, the actual like native residents of America are the Native Americans. Those are the Native Indians. Anyone who is white in America is part of those. Their ancestors were the people that went to America and killed everyone and then took over the whole land and took it for themselves. So that's why I'm really confused about like white pride, especially when it comes to America. I understand white pride in terms of Europe because that's actually where they're from. But white Americans aren't actually truly American. And it's so weird that they have this like weird white pride that I just really don't understand when they're not even like native to America. It's really confusing. I think a lot of Americans are confused. But yeah. Do I agree with protesters looting? No, I don't. I honestly don't. Oh, so maybe you're not aware of what's happening. So there's a lot of information coming out. So there's like these guys who are paid by, I can't remember who exactly it is, but basically there are these guys who are paid money to instigate looting. So like those are the people you see who are planting bricks. Those are the people who are starting the looting, smashing things. Those are like people that are paid. There's also policemen doing it. And there's a group of like people who wear like Hawaiian shirts who are starting to be identified as part of like this specific group who are being paid to instigate looting. But I really don't know what the agenda is. Like I've been looking deep into it. And one of the reasons is because there was even a video that came out, right? And there was this news reporter who was playing gunshot sounds behind like the camera. So they were doing like this news interview. And then this reporter went behind the camera and started playing gunshot sounds. So it would look like or seem like there's guns, people are shooting guns in the air. So police would come and start shooting people. So I really don't know what the agenda is. I really have no idea why there's so many people inciting violence, from the police to like groups that are being paid to even reporters and news outlets. The theory that everyone has is that the US government want to enact martial law so they can take control of the country. Um, I'm not too sure if that's like true, but there are signs. There are signs, because why else would you instigate like violence, especially like the police doing it? It's just insane. What happened with the CSM blackface thing? Oh, that's a long ass story. That's a really long story. That's a long story. What do you think about many of the major corporations that funded private prisons? Yeah, anyone who funds private prisons, whether you are racist or you're not, you're contributing to racism. I can get into that in another like live stream. If you guys want me to talk about it, then maybe I will. Yeah, so Virgil's getting a lot of I said backlash for donating $50. I'll get into that later because a lot of people are asking me about that. But yeah, I'm trying to catch up to the questions. Yeah, so a group called Boogaloo adopted the Hawaiian shirt at protest. Video of them in DC show them wearing it. They're white supremacists who are instigating violence. Yeah, that's true. This is true. So, okay, I might as well explain it since he kind of explained it. So, what Virgil Abloh did was he donated $50 and he put it on his story, right? But the whole point of the $50 was that it was an idea where he was showing this $50 and him and his friends started this chain of like matching a $50 donation to the cause, right? So the reason why it was $50 is because $50 is an amount that most people can afford. So the whole point of it was so that normal everyday people could match that donation. So he wanted to get a chain reaction of donations going. But then people misrepresented that as all he was donating was $50. And then, yeah, everyone cancelled Virgil. And yeah, people call him a coon and whatever. But I mean, a lot of people that call him a coon, and this is the issue I have with like the black community in general, like it's so divisive because Virgil Abloh has contributed to the careers of so many black creatives. It's insane. And like you have people who have never done anything from the black community, but they're quick to just cancel people, which I just don't like. And I'm not a fan of. And ultimately, Virgil actually donated like 20K. And he had to talk about it, but his plan, he didn't want to talk about it because he wasn't sure if like people would take that the wrong way because of how people are on social media and be like, oh, he's trying to flex like by showing us he's donating all this money. But yeah, honestly, yeah, I just don't understand why. For me, anyone that donates to the cause is helping the cause in some way. It doesn't matter how big or small. And the fact he donated thousands, I don't see why people have an issue with it. It's just like a celebrity will donate 1 million. People say it's not enough. They donate 10 million. It's not enough. So at this point, I support anyone that supports the movement, no matter how small they give, because ultimately it still helps. Every little counts. And most of the people on social media that go around like canceling people are virtue signalers, and they themselves have not donated or protested or done anything to help the cause. But they're always quick to like cancel people and be judgmental about others. So I take all that stuff with a grain of salt, honestly. Yeah, exactly. So he said like ID only gets white skinny boys because he is based in the whole rock culture and French inspo. That's true. And that's why, to an extent, it makes sense that Adi Saman only has like mainly all these white European skinny models on his runway. I don't necessarily have a big issue with that. The only time I will have an issue is Adi Saman, if he ever has a collection that's inspired by African culture or, I don't know, Chinese culture, Asian culture in general, and he still has the same model base, then it will be a bit problematic. Have I ever studied Black Studies? I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, I don't think that's a thing in England. Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. Yeah, exactly. It was a social initiative. Yeah. Um, I've so about this, I've seen a lot of videos where like I saw this video where like a black model was in the midst of like a lot of white models and she was complaining about how she's not casted for a lot of runway shows. And she was just talking about, and it wasn't just a black model, it was like a Chinese model as well. They were talking about how difficult it is being in the fashion industry. And then this white model was like, she was like, "Oh my god, like I have problems too. Like, do you know how long it takes to like do my blonde hair? Like, oh my god, it takes me hours." So, getting models to understand racism, yeah, that's going to take a long time. Yeah, yeah. What do you say? Rioters burned down a American nonprofit. See, that's why I the looting. I'm not really too much of a fan of it, to be fair. But that being said, I don't know for a fact who instigated that because I know the agendas and I've seen all these videos of like police starting looting and literally burning stuff down. Like I saw a video, right, of policemen destroying a police car. So they were destroying a police car and then they left the area and then they called in like their police station and then called in that there are rioters who are destroying police cars and attacking them. And then they brought armed reinforcements. I was like, what are they doing? Like, what is the agenda here? So I just, with the whole rioting and stuff, I really just need to take a sit back and really assess the situation and see who exactly is doing what. Because everyone's involved. There's rioters involved, there's policemen involved, there's people who are funded to instigate stuff involved. Those are the same people that are planting bricks and weapons. Like, it's all insane, man. America's just a weird place. America's a really crazy place. Oh, George Soros. Yeah. So George Soros that's true. So he's one of the people who is funding people to instigate. I don't know who he is, but yeah, I heard that he's one of the people funding people to instigate like looting and violence and stuff. So yeah, it's crazy, man. Do you think Jordan Peele's take on not casting white actors in his movies because he's already seen those movies can be drawn to fashion? I should still see the same old heritage collections again. Do you know something, right? So I don't see why people have an issue with all black movies. Because let me be really honest with you. When I see a movie that's like all white, I really don't have a problem with it. So why do people have a problem with it the other way around? Because to me, a movie is just like directors and like a certain number of people. They have this idea, and let's say because the director is white, so they see it from the perspective of a white person. So it's a story of a white person, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like if I just think of if I was a white person, I have white family, I have white friends. So in a movie where they portray a white person living a life where there's other white people and they talk to their white friends and like it's normal. That's normal. So the same can be seen for the reverse. There's black people who navigate themselves as black people who have black friends and go to stores where there's black people. So I don't see why people have, it's just a story seen from the lens of a black person as opposed to a white person. Either way there's nothing wrong with it. Like I don't see why people have a problem with both sides. So I don't really see anything wrong with a black director saying, I've seen so many white movies, let me make some black ones. Yeah, I think people just make these things a lot deeper than they are. Also, if we go into like deeper into this Hollywood thing, I think what people should have an issue with, is when a story is historically Asian, and this happens a lot with black, but I like to say Asians because like I like to bring up this fact that this happens to Asians as well, not just black people. So when a story is based on like Asian culture, there's many movies that the character is based on an Asian character and then they cast a white model, right? I have an issue with that because you want the story to be true to the heritage of the information of the story. So that is why you should cast an Asian actor for an Asian role. I think that makes sense. I think people, so the counter argument to that is like people say, isn't that acting though? Like the whole point of a good actor is you're supposed to be able to pretend. I don't think that holds weight when we're talking of like a story being true to the heritage of the information. So if a story is based around a black person, why isn't the actor black? I think acting skill comes in terms of like portraying yourself in different lights. So like acting as a criminal and then acting as, I don't know, a disabled person and then acting like, I think that's where like the acting skill comes in, or like acting in different accents. So like in one movie, you're playing someone who's from like, I don't know, America, and then another movie you're playing like a British person. That's like more acting skill. It's not an acting skill to be a white person and act like a black person, because then you just promote stereotypes and it gets really racist really quickly. What do you say? Honestly, don't get the agenda is here. Like it's all going to get bad for all of us here if stuff goes left. I totally agree. I really hope that America doesn't go under martial law. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. Okay, let's talk about this. What about Asians discriminating against blacks and controlling African food and cosmetic products, refusing to sell to blacks or overcharging them? Yep, that is something that happens. Okay, so with the Asian culture, and I can just say this because I have so many Chinese friends and we talk about this all the time. So with my Chinese friends, I've had discussions as to why, in their perspective, do they think the Asian community is so racist to black people? And the general consensus from my friends, and these are like Chinese people who grew up in China. So like they have a really concrete perspective on like the Asian mindset. And from what they tell me is that Asian culture, so in Asia, and when I say Asia, Asia is a whole continent. So I can't really speak for the whole continent of Asia, but we're talking about China specifically, is that in China, Chinese people, they want to portray themselves as like model citizens. So they want to be known as like the model citizen, this concept of being a model citizen. And then also they really, really aspire towards European culture. So to a point, a lot of Asian culture almost worships white culture and European culture to a point where they just take anything that they're fed from Western media as facts. So in Asia, I keep saying Asia wrongfully, I mean in China. So in China, where there's not that many black people don't have a first-hand experience of living with and around black people. So their only knowledge of what a black person is what they see from media, from places where there's a lot of black people. So places like Europe and places like America. And in America, all they portray is this hip hop thing of like violence or black people committing crime. So then that is what, let's say, people from China are going to think all black people are like, because they don't have first-hand experience with black people. So then that just promotes racism against black people. And then that's when you see those type of situations. So yeah, it's deep, man. It's deep. But anyone who's Asian, like, I want you to also share your opinion as to why you think the Asian community is really racist to like black people, for example. Someone said, have I gone to protest? Yes, I have. I peacefully protested in London. But I'm trying to keep my protesting, to a minimal, in terms of like in person, because ultimately the risk of COVID-19 is not gone, and we also have to be cognizant of that. How do you think we should educate people within racism most easily? Feels like the younger generation is more open to new culture here in Sweden. I really hope it gets better. So, okay, my approach to telling people about racism is one of discussion. So, one, I really don't want to like say bad things about fellow Black people, but as a Black person, just something I see that frustrates me is if us as people, like collectively, Asians, Black people, anyone, everyone, we have to come together to end racism and prejudice, right? So that means that for us to end racism, so I'm speaking as a Black person, right? So as Black people, we feel like the system that was put in place by white people mainly is racist. So I don't see this idea of like, if we want to end racism, basically my point is we need to involve everyone in the conversation. Asians, white people, they need to have a voice, because people can only learn through discussion. And that's something I've learned in life. The issue I have with a lot of Black people is when the conversation is about racism, they never let any Asian or white person speak. And so the situation always becomes combative from what I've seen. So it always becomes a Black person saying, you have privilege, so you can't talk about racism, you don't know anything. And then the white person or the Asian gets defensive, and then they get really defensive, and then no one learns anything. And then it just becomes like people defending each other. And then it just becomes a battle of like, who is more oppressed? I would rather everyone's involved in the discussion and we can all have a civil discussion and people learn. I think that's the way people learn. People learn from discussions, not from arguments, not from heated arguments. So I think one way for us to educate each other about racism is mainly discussion and involving everyone's voice and making everyone's voice valid in the conversation. I think obviously a white person can't come and say whether racism does or doesn't exist because they don't experience it, but just to dismiss every person who isn't Black's opinion on what racism is, I think is counterproductive, especially if a lot of Black people claim that racism is mainly done by white people. Then if you don't involve them in the conversation, how are they going to learn or know ways in which we can kind of get rid of racism or prejudice? So I think my hope for the younger generation is that more people are kind of more open to discussion, especially about the issue. What do you say? It's Antifa, white anarchists, not even Black people. Yeah, so from what I've seen, yeah, a lot of Antifa members are the ones doing a lot of looting, and then the like protesters are peacefully protesting. But yeah, I really don't know what the agenda is. I guess only time will tell. Did you know that white feminism was started by racist Southern white women who were pissed that Blacks gained more civil rights than they had after the Civil War? Yes, I did know that, and that's why white feminism till now does kind of neglect all the issues of anyone who isn't white. So like Asians or Arabs or Black people in general. Yeah, this is another thing. If they enact martial law in the US, it's not just going to affect Black people, guys. It's going to affect everyone. So just be careful. Be careful, guys. And please don't instigate violence if you do go to a protest. If you see a brick, report it to the police. Actually, don't report it to the police because the police are part of it. But yeah, I don't know. Just don't pick up a brick, please. I beg you. I'm just catching up. Do you think all influencers should talk about racism? And if they don't, do you think they're racist? I've seen arguments about this. So I've seen this argument too, where people say that if you don't talk about racism, that you're racist. Now, why I don't agree with this standpoint is because there are some people who genuinely want to talk about racism, but because they don't understand it or they don't know too much about it, they're scared. And they're scared because if they say the wrong thing, they're going to be cancelled. But if they don't say anything, they're going to be cancelled. So it's like, I hate this thing about like this whole racism issue where damned if I do, damned if I don't. Like, it's so counterproductive to the whole issue. It's so annoying. And I think that's why a lot of influencers are not speaking out. That being said, I think the people that must speak out are people who profit off of Black culture. So anyone that profits off Black culture, they have to, because what that says to someone like me is it's okay when you're making money off anything that's off Black culture, but when it's time to talk about the issues that are from the culture that you profit off, then you don't want to speak. So a good example, any white rapper has to speak out, because if you are a white person that partakes in hip hop was started by Black people, and hip hop is the origins of hip hop was basically a way for Black people to express themselves when they were under a lot of oppression. So that is actually the history of hip hop. So hip hop stems from a lot of oppression. So if you're a white person, you're okay selling millions of record deals from a culture that was started by Black people. But then when it's time to talk about Black issues, you don't want to, then yes, I feel like you should be held accountable. But just the everyday person, I don't think we should hold them to that same standard. So I think it just depends on the person and if they profit off of Black people or Black culture or not. The problem with that is when the role is based on another culture, the chosen actor is always white. Yes, exactly. Which is why I said that, say it's a movie where the story is actually set in China, please use Chinese actors. But yeah, that's something I could get into forever, honestly. Yeah, exactly. So a good example is Death Note. Yep, exactly. Good point. Good point. Whoa, I'm so behind. Oh, dang. Jeez, I'm so behind. Wait, hold on. Is it okay for labels not to talk about Black Lives Matter? Sometimes I don't want a label to get political because I want to associate them only with the raw beauty there, but then to create. I think I just touched on this, but basically, what my viewpoint on this is that you should only be held to the standard to speak out if you profit off of Black culture. So if you're a brand to where your art is about African culture or you profit from Black culture, so this is a reason why like brands like Dior need to do something about it, because Dior have been profiting off of like African culture since I can remember. They make all these collections where they reference African culture, but when it's time to actually support the cause, then they're silent. So once again, it just depends. It depends. It's not like black and white. It really depends, because people get cancelled for not speaking out on it, and then people get cancelled for like saying the wrong thing. So some people even mean well, and they clearly support the movement, but they just make one mistake and they're cancelled. So it's like it's really complicated. It's not black and white. People need to stop seeing a lot of things in just like left and right, black and white. Like people need to, like, issues are more complex than that in life, just in general. What do you say? Mainland Chinese are more susceptible to agreeing with media narratives because of how information is disseminated in their country. That's a really, really, really good point. I could get into that, but that's a really good point. Actually, I won't get into it because I'm scared of the Chinese government. Oh my. Okay, this is a good example. People in Mexico use the N-word like a joke or to reference black people because the only black media that they got is rap and trap. Yeah. What do you say? Because Asians are racist and they thought racism is a white thing. Yep. Yep. The roots of house drum and bass are techno and are black. I don't know what the fuck Europe's on. So he's saying thank you for the music. Yep. So we could get into it, but almost every black genre is from black people. That, if we're gonna be frank, like rock is from black people, hip hop is from black people, drum and bass from black people, grime is from black people, drill is from black people. Yeah, jazz is from black people. Yeah, yeah. What do you say? Asian to Asian racism is also a thing here. Really? Actually, I do know that for a fact because I know in places like Japan, just from like books I've read and like experiences, I know that in Japan, like so from what I know, because of history and how the Japanese like treated China in like the past and like the massacres that Japanese did on places like China, Chinese people don't like the Japs, and if I'm not mistaken, Koreans don't like Japanese people as well. So there's like a lot of tension between like those three countries. As a Black American, I don't believe that the base of America are racist. However, the systems built on top of it are clearly racist. I agree, and I can get into that for anyone that like doesn't believe that that's true. I'm Indian. I live in India. Some people are racist here because there's a lack of education on the subject. It comes down to ignorance or nonchalance. I agree. And even if you're from India, right? So India also has a big colorism problem, and I feel like that comes from Europe. So any country that has, should I get into it? Okay, let's get into it. This is going to be a long ass live, but so one thing I learned, and this is from me living in Nigeria for 6 years, is I learned that how much power Europe still has on like countries in Africa and Commonwealth countries, so especially Britain, countries they've ruled on in the past. So the whole European thing is divide and conquer. So they go into a country, they divide it, and when a country is divided, it's much easier to then take over the country when people are fighting each other. So I'll talk about my country in particular, Nigeria. So they mess the Nigerians up mentally so much to the point where everyone just wants to be like a European now because they feel like the more European they are, the more accepted they are and the better they are. And because of that, indoctrination into these people's minds, that's why colorism is a big thing. And that's why if you're a fairer skinned Black person, you're treated better. You're more likely to get certain jobs. You're more likely to be sent abroad by your company. So yeah, colorism is a whole other thing that is also stemmed from like European kind of like conquering and all the stuff that has happened over the years that I could get into. But yeah, that's a really long thing. I read that in China, the Chinese people who have darker skin are treated worse than Chinese with lighter skin. I just touched on that. Yeah. Every single country, people with lighter skin are treated better than people with darker skin because everyone emulates European culture and people worship Western culture. So people basically want to be as white as possible because they feel like they'll be more accepted, essentially. Yep. I totally agree with this. Yep. I totally agree. Do you think that outrage surrounding Gucci's ski mask was an overreaction? I wouldn't say it's an overreaction. I just don't like the way people handle when cultural appropriation does happen because so I've been to a school where it was all white people. Like I've been to a school that was like 99.9% white, and I was like one of the only Black people in the whole school. And in that school, I was the first Black person that a lot of people in that school had met, like personally. So I realized there was so many things they did that was racist, so many things that they said that was racist. But the thing I realized is that these people were trying so hard not to be racist, but they still ended up being racist because they don't understand anything about the history. So there's things that they do that they didn't know that was racist, but because they're not educated on the subject matter, that they would just do it anyway, not knowing that it's racist. So in situations like that, I feel like the best way to handle it is education and educating people as to why it's racist. I think canceling people once again is counterproductive, and just calling people out for racism without education is counterproductive because what happens in that situation is people don't learn from their mistakes. They're just defensive. And for me personally, I just want people to learn. So any way that we just cancel people and this brand's cancelled, I just don't think that helps in any way. So with the Gucci outrage, I wouldn't say it was an overreaction. I just don't like how it was done, essentially. What do you say? Yeah, because mainstream Asia, they're led to believe that lighter is more beautiful due to being influenced heavily by Westerners. I agree. I agree. This is also true. I try to have hope that the next generation is going to be less racist, but then I see like 18-year-old Americans and they're just as bad. They're just as bad. Yeah, it's mad. We need groups of people that protect and de-escalate situations. I agree. I agree. Chinese people have been oppressed in the last century or two from all sides up until recently. That led to a strong sense of Chinese pride and nationalism, wanting to be superior in the world. I can understand that. I can understand that. It's deeper than that, and I do know what you're getting at, but yeah. As an Asian, you are correct about Asians being racist to blacks. Yeah, it's just when you're not like around a lot of black people, you just don't understand that, and it's not their fault. Like it's not their fault, but that's why it needs education. Just need to educate these people, because if you haven't been around a lot of black people, you don't have the intelligence to just understand that people are just people, and they're bad people of all races and they're good people of all races. And when you have no experience of black people, but what you see on TV is either a black person committing a crime or some like statistic that makes no sense of like black people proportionally committing more crimes than white people, or you see something on TV that says black people have a lower IQ on average, or you see all this type of stuff, you're just going to think that you're either going to think black people are just criminals, dangerous, scary, or primitive by nature. And it's so deep. Like on the past live stream, I did a live stream where I was talking about like what the definition of a black person was 200 years ago. There was actually a dictionary definition of black people, like even as recent as like 80 years ago. So before the Civil Rights Act in America, which wasn't that long ago. I think it was like in the around 1960 something, if I'm not mistaken. The definition of black people, that was the definition. And the definition was like, so it went into like the characteristics of what a black person is. So like wide nose, big lips, dark hair, curly hair. And then it said, literally by definition, it said, and the word they used obviously was Negro. And it said, basically the definition in this, in the dictionary at that time was Negro. These people have very violent characteristics. Stay away from them unless they are chained. They are very known to be violent regardless of the situation. These people are pathological liars. The darker the skin, the more pathological of a liar they are. The darker the skin, the more violent they are. That was like literally, that was the type of stuff that was in the dictionary definition of how they described black people. So think of how recent the 1960s is. So let's go back to 1950. So people that were born in 1950 that were being taught that in school are still alive. So those people pass that mindset to their kids, and then those kids pass it down to their kids. So that is how fresh that kind of teaching still is in life. So we have a long way to go in terms of just ending racism in general. But that is it's things like that that contribute to stuff like that that people won't talk about. Let's see. I talked about this earlier. You might have to watch the live back. I'll leave it up. It's really because of misinformation, lack of education, which would lead to false stereotypes. The bad apples make it worse. Okay, so let me tell you guys something about like something I learned, right? So one of my really good friends, he is a professor of statistics. So I have talked to him about this really deeply, like in a philosophical, I can't even speak anymore because I'm speaking so much, in a philosophical way, right? So one thing that I talked to with this professor is like how statistics are made. And what this professor was basically telling me was that when it comes to I can't even speak, statistics, right? When you make a statistic, you have a certain idea of what you want to prove in your mind, and then you find supporting evidence to prove your point. So in the case of stats where you see that like black people disproportionately commit more crime, that doesn't tell the full story. And I was getting into this with like this professor, right? And he's white, by the way, so there's no like hidden agenda or whatever. And the reason why was because the statistic that they come up with for black people committing more crime on average comes down to black people being arrested. So sorry, more black people being arrested on average than white people. Now, if we go deeper into this stat, right? So I gave this professor a really good example. So when I grew up in London, I had never seen drugs in my whole life. I'd never seen weed. I'd never seen cocaine. I'd never seen ecstasy. I'd never seen pills. I'd never seen anything. Then when I went to this white school, there was literally like drugs, just like the drugs were as common as like water. Like it was that bad. Like, and there was not really any police policing it there. There wasn't really much of a police presence. So people just used to commit crime there and get away with it like how they please, because there wasn't really much of a police presence there. So the problem is a lot of police focus their time policing black areas. So when police focus their time policing black areas, what happens is more black people get arrested because, like I said, people will always be people. So there's white people that commit crime, black people that commit crime, white people that commit crime. So if you just take police, you put police in a black area, and then you arrest the criminals that exist in that black area, and then you use that as a statistic for black people commit more crime. That doesn't really tell all of the story, because you could quite easily take police to like the area where I went to school for 2 years, where there was just drugs common. And as far as I know, in the UK, it's a huge criminal offense to sell class A drugs like cocaine. It's like 15 years in prison. So all those guys that were selling cocaine in and around my school, they're all criminals. If the police just came into my area and arrested all those people, that would balance the stats. So stats like black people could disproportionately commit more crime don't actually say anything, because it's just a stat that people use when they want to prove a point. And that's basically what people do in everything. Like when I was talking to this professor, so people do that in terms of diet. So like a good example is people say that red meat is not healthy for you, right? And when people do this stat, a good stat, which hasn't been done yet, is like, let's see if it's unhealthy if you eat red meat that's organic and grass-fed, right? That is a really good study, but a study hasn't been done on that. So when people want to kind of prove that red meat is bad, they just take people that eat red meat and then say, based on these people that have eaten red meat, their health is bad, therefore red meat is bad. But those people could be eating all types of red meat, from McDonald's, processed meat, like things like bacon. They don't take into account actual healthy red meat that's organic and the cows or the animals are grass-fed. So in terms of statistics across the board, unless it's done properly and fairly, they mean nothing. So going back to this, the reason why I got deep into that is because this comment was about misinformation. And a lot of misinformation stems from like stats that don't actually mean anything or aren't done properly, essentially. And then people just like buy into the stats, like, oh my God, this stat says that black people do this, it must be true. So once again, that is also part of the misinformation. But yeah, let's catch up to these. Let's catch up to these comments. The media narrative of protest going on right now is just as, yep, that's true, because they make it seem like basically all the protesters are the ones doing all the looting, when actually it's police and paid instigators, which is insane. I don't know what their agenda is, once again. Like, the media narrative, wait, hold on. Let's see. The Chinese here in Singapore look down on the mainland Chinese. Why is that? Why is that? Do you think the current revolution we are having against racism will give people more bravery to speak out on issues such as being underpaid or used as a creative worker. I hope so. I hope so. I hope people just learn to speak up for themselves. I think India has a lot of this whitening cream to get more white. Yep. And that is also in Africa. Yeah. Any culture that has where people exist on a range of like colors, like in terms of like shades, a lot of them in their culture have whitening cream. So like in African culture, Indians, like a lot of stuff. As an Asian American, I believe that Asians are racist to black people is because of Europeans influencing them. Especially in the Philippines, my homeland, we were colonized by Spanish, Japan, US. There we go. Let's see. What do you say? The thing here in Singapore is more xenophobia. That's understandable. Australia has a very big racism problem. Explain it, because I don't know anything about Australia. I could, once again, I also don't like to speak on like things I don't know about. So, because I just don't want to like share false information. We live in a very diverse multicultural population. So if anything chaotic happens more on one race, discrimination happens. Fair enough. Tribalism is actually inherent. People reject things that are different. And if they aren't educated on the subject, they'll continue to hold those views. And that is exactly why I said it's all about education. So people just need to be aware of like, so for example, when I went to that school where everyone was white and they hadn't met any black people, yes, it was really, really, really frustrating that they were racist as hell. But I personally don't think they meant to be racist. I think they just did not get it. And I think I made it my job to educate them about it, because otherwise, how will they know? And I think that's how we should tackle these things, rather than just tackling it in a really aggressive way. Because some people, obviously there's situations like America, they know what they're doing. Like, I'm sure all of you know that story where that woman like called the police on that white guy who was like looking at birds. She knew what she was doing. She's clearly racist, like, and she understands her racism. That's a bit different to like the school I went to. Those are two different situations. So you also have to be like aware of the situation. But yeah, like I said, it's really complicated. What do you say? I've been seeing a lot of my favorite designers, Raf June, been staying quiet on social media, so but should people feel some type of way? I touched on this earlier, so I think maybe guys can answer your questions in a comment. There will still be hella idiots, but overall it should be all right. Yeah. Do you think the actual association of color translate over into racism? For example, black and white with no in-betweens. Yep, I totally agree. I agree. Since blacks and whites are neither black or white, but actually peach, sand, brown. Yeah, I guess so. I think the political correctness has counterintuitively made our generation more susceptible to having racist ideas. I totally agree. And that's why I just like discussion. I would rather people share how they really feel, and then we can discuss, okay, how did you come to that opinion? How did you, and that's why you have to involve white people and Asians and everyone in the conversation, because if a white person's racist, I feel like those type of people are really combative. So I feel like the only way is let them share their racist views, and then you can then ask them, okay, why do you think like that? How did you come to that opinion? Where does that come from? Why do you think like that? And then you can actually have a discussion, and maybe, you don't know, you could change their mind. But if you handled that person, if you're just like, you're racist, fuck out of here, they'll just get defensive and no one learns anything, and they're just going to leave there being racist as fuck, and they're never going to change. So that's just me personally. That's how I feel like we can solve the issue. People also emulate Western culture for the economic opportunity. Here in California, Hispanic children going to school lose a bit of their culture to succeed in school. That's sad. That's quite sad. Black is always seen as bad in all forms, so it may have correlation. I agree. Like if you look at if you look at the definition of just like black as a word, then you'll see. Why does everyone know the swastika is bad, but blackface isn't across the globe? I think because more people are aware of the history of the swastika, but I honestly don't think a lot of people are aware of the history of blackface. So when I was in this school, And this is why I say these people weren't racist, you know, like they're not, like they are racist in based on like what they do and the things they say, but I don't think they meant to be, which is why I really wasn't trying to condemn them, because I don't think they were doing it on purpose. Like, so the school I went to that was really white, there was a guy who did blackface, and I wasn't even angry about it. I just came up to him and I said, "Are you aware of the history of blackface?" And he told me he wasn't. So I sat him down while he had his face in blackface, and I took him through the history of like Jim Crow and why blackface is actually bad and the history of it and why it can be seen as offensive to black people. And actually, he was like, "Wow, I never knew that. I'm probably never going to do this again because I just didn't know that this is the history of it." So I think people just don't know. So our focus should be more about education than just canceling people, because in that situation, I could have just had a tantrum and no one would have learned anything. So yeah, honestly, it's just all about education, guys. It's about education. They don't teach blackface in Europe or the world. That's why you got dumbass soccer players wearing it for Halloween. Yep, I literally just said this. Yep, exactly. Yeah, we have the internet, but the thing about the internet is you have to search the term Black history of blackface to find the history of blackface. So unless you're pursuing knowing about the history of that, you won't know about it. So yeah, that's another thing. Think if you see a man in an all-white suit versus all-black suit, think of how you view those colors despite actual race, ethnicity, or heritage. Yep, true. Stats are always skewed to some extent because there's a bias. Yep, I totally agree. I agree. Oh, I think, wow, I'm so behind. So this is when I was talking about like stats. Yeah. Hidden bias that they don't even think about. Totally true. Damn, I'm so behind. I believe education would indeed be the most effective against racism. The only problem is that it entirely depends on the majority to initiate it. That is also true. That's true. That is true. Our world is connected now that informing people of other cultures is so important. We got to get connected at a deeper level. Appreciate and not hate. Facts. Seeing too many white kids able to smuggle any kind of drug into any kind of area and not even get caught. But think about it. That's a crime. But then those people won't get arrested, so they're not part of the stats. So yeah, it's so deep. I could really get into it because this discussion that I had with this professor was like hours and hours long. So I could really go deep into it, but I won't. I'll save all of you the time. Just like when Kanye tried to make the Confederate flag a statement, he was doing what Nazis did, which was steal a symbol and change its meaning. Yeah. And even get caught, and there's some level of a wrist slap, and they are calm. Yeah, I mean, like, isn't there this like white swimmer or something? I think he went to Stanford. You guys probably know who he is, but this guy raped a woman in broad daylight, and he only got 6 months in jail, and he was released in like 3 months, I think. So yeah, crazy. To me, I feel like any rapist should just die in prison. Like, just put them in prison for life. Honestly, I really don't want those people to ever be allowed out of jail. Those people just they deserve to just be locked up for the rest of their life. Honestly. What are your thoughts on those that remain silent? Sorry, on the issues of Black Lives Matter. Do you believe all people should be speaking out? I touched on this earlier. You're gonna have to watch the live back. I'm so sorry, but yeah. My dad isn't convinced racism is as bad as it is, and he made the point I'm struggling to argue against. He said, in majority black areas, there will be more black leaders, and racism is still there. Wait, what? Wait, in the majority black areas, there will be more black leaders, and racism is still there. Huh? That's a bit confusing. How can there be racism between black people? That's a bit confusing. I touched on this earlier. I'm so sorry. You're gonna have to watch it back. You're gonna have to. It's just because for the people that have been here from earlier, I don't want to like keep answering the same question. But yeah, I did touch on it earlier. 90% of 90% of police are from outside of the neighborhoods they are brutalizing. That's another fact. Yeah. Let's see. Singaporeans tend to value Western ideas / white worship is rampant. They have a Chinese work ethic, though. More are multiracial as well. They see mainland as less civilized, almost more rude. Oh, okay, that's fair enough. So this is a continuation of when you said that Chinese people in Singapore look down on people from mainland China, right? And many of them are not doing anything, e.g., by helping education in majority POC areas. So by having more Black people in power, it will not help racism. I do not agree with. I just know. Okay, so you're continuing. So you said, and many of them are not doing anything, e.g., by helping education in majority POC areas. So by having more Black people in power, it will not help racism. I could get so deep into that, but I just won't. The reports I've seen actually said like 3 times in 5 minutes that you should not think that people are looting are the same people as the people protesting. Yep. 3 times in 5. Okay, yeah. I agree, because from what I've seen anyway, it's a lot of the protesters are a lot of the looters, are actually policemen and paid looters. I believe that in some parts of Asia, at least for skin color, pale skin wasn't initially for white worship. Now, though, it's become a whole mess. Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. This is really true. Oh my God. I can give you guys a story about this. Oh my God. So, okay, one time I walked into this Prada store and I could tell from the get-go, because so I've worked in enough like fashion companies to know that there's like code for like when a Black person enters the store that they think poses a threat. So on this day, because I just don't really care. So on this day, I came to buy a specific thing. So I wasn't really dressed up in any kind of way. Because it was close to where I live. So like, I just came in a tracksuit and some trainers, walked into this Prada store, and I was met by like 5 security guards. Like, what do you want? What do you want? And I was the only person in the whole store that had 5 security guards around me asking me what I want. And everyone else was just peacefully looking at garments on their own. And I already know that this situation already stemmed from racism. So I have very cheeky ways of combating these situations. So me being someone that studies a lot of fashion, what I did, and I knew before I went to this Prada store, I knew this was going to happen. So I did like some research on Prada's Spring Summer 17 collection, because actually the piece I wanted was from that collection. So this lets you guys know how long ago this was. But I walked into the store and they were being really like strange and following me everywhere I went in the store. So I asked them for this specific piece in this specific collection, and I like went really deep into like the references of the collection, because I knew it would confuse the guys who work there, because I know like most people that work for retail stores don't actually know too much about fashion. They just like work for the store. So I knew they wouldn't know what I'm talking about. And my whole point in that situation was to make them feel stupid. And then they from that situation, and it's so weird that I had to do that before they just left me alone. But because of what I said, and because from what I said, they realized, oh, this guy must be a proper fan of Prada. He must not be a threat. Oh, wow. Then they just left me alone, which is crazy. But I just know things like that happens. And I know that's the only way to combat it. What do you say? Lack of knowledge and people avoiding difficult conversations is the big problem. I was naive because I myself never aligned with racists. So I didn't realize how big of an issue it still is. Yeah, and that's why I like to have discussions. I don't like it when people dismiss anyone's opinion in the conversation of racism, because I feel like everyone has a part to play in ending racism. Everyone, Latinos, Asians, white people, black people. So I feel like everyone's opinion is valid, and that's why I always like to discuss it. I really hate that in conversations of racism, people dismiss people's opinions, especially based on like skin color. Like people say, white people, your opinion isn't valid because you don't experience racism. But it's like, okay, even if you think white people don't experience racism, your whole argument is that white people are the people that commit most of the racism, or white people are the people that contribute to the problem of racism. So how is their opinion not valid? If anything, their opinion is the most valid in changing it if we educate people on like the issues of racism. So yeah, once again, it's about education, in my opinion. Sad because I run a business. There's not so black cultured niche, and I don't even show myself. Not because I'm afraid, but it just automatically gives you thoughts based on skin. But all glory to God. Yeah, it is sad. It's sad. Yeah, because once you take the kids out of that all-white school and into a place where there's more culture, they come back with a new mindset. Yeah, facts. I.e., leaving said village mindset behind and actually meeting people who aren't stereotypes. Facts. Let's see. I'm from Oregon, and I just learned this last year that Oregon was dubbed a white haven back in the day. It's wild how deep it truly is. Yeah, that's crazy. Where's Oregon again? Oregon's in Portland, right? Yeah. People really need to engage in honest dialogue to fix this damn problem. I agree. 100% agree. Let's see. Also, how do you deal with the banter in secondary school, which is literally just racism? Because if I try it, I just get called a snowflake and they laugh it off saying it's a joke. Yeah, so that's a bit of a tough one. That's a really good question, actually, because I feel like, okay, in British culture, parts of British culture are very not politically correct. So like in the UK, people make a lot of racist jokes, and if you don't partake in the jokes, people see it as like you can't take a joke or you're a snowflake. And it's really complicated because I think it depends on the person, the situation, and the context. It's so deep. However, there are times when this banter or these jokes are said in the wrong context in a situation where it's actually really problematic. Not that I'm excusing like racist jokes, but I feel like there's a few situations where like it's actually funny. Like, okay, let me give you a good example. I don't like that comedians are censored. I feel like comedians should be able to say anything. And I feel like when the comedians make what is deemed as like racist jokes, it's actually because those are not jokes that are really, really deeply rooted in like racism. Like, so someone like, I'm not sure if you guys know who like Andrew Schultz is. When he makes a racist joke, it's actually funny. It's not rooted in racism. So it also depends on where it's coming from. Is it just made as from the comedian standpoint to make it as an attempt to make people laugh, or is it actually rooted in like deep racism? And the problem is in school, a lot of the time it's deeply rooted in racism. It's not like actually a joke. They mask it as a joke, but it really isn't a joke. So it really depends on the context. But yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. I agree with this. Unless the crime is heinous, we should not be canceling people before they learn better, especially when the person does not know, because there are people who genuinely do not know, like I said. So do you think that people who align on the far left make it more difficult to spread the message of anti-racism? Yes. So once again, I don't like that in politics, and this is just how I navigate life. I don't like that everything is seen as like left or right, black or white. So when it comes to politics, I don't like it that people side, either on this side or this side. In everything, I'm always somewhere in the middle. So in politics, I'm in the middle. In everything, I'm in the middle, because there's always two sides that make sense. And the issue I have with the far left is their approach is too aggressive, and it doesn't actually help, in my opinion. The right is too aggressive as well. So when it comes to racism, if I'm just thinking of like the right, so people on the right are like more what people consider conservatives, right? So what the type of opinion I expect from a white, okay, not even white, but just say someone on the right, is they say things like, wow, my opinion isn't valid because I'm white. Clearly, that is known as racism, because literally I can't say anything based on my skin color. Then someone on the left would say something like, you can't say anything because like you're the oppressor, blah, 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 blah. Both of those approaches don't help. Both of them. They're both aggressive in nature, and both of them, those two approaches just make people get defensive. And me personally, I'm about educating people about racism. And I don't think you can effectively educate someone about racism if how you start the conversation is by painting someone as like an evil oppressor, or like if you paint someone as like, I don't know, this aggressive oppressor that enables racism. That is not how you educate someone about an issue. I feel like you tackle it by educating them in a very specific way that isn't combative. And I feel like, once again, this person that said, do you think that people who are lying on the far left make it more difficult? I do feel like they do make it more difficult to spread the message of anti-racism, because their approach is a bit too aggressive for my liking. I don't like any approach to racism that makes people defensive, because when people are defensive, no one learns. It just becomes people arguing about stats. Well, black people are more likely to commit this crime. Well, white people are more likely to do this, and no one learns. It just becomes like a contest of who has better facts and better stats. And like I've told you guys, most stats are meaningless. Like most statistics are meaningless unless they're done really well. And there's very few stats that are actually done like really, really well. I identify the white people in your school. Only had one black friend until high school, and I never really thought if I was being racist at the time, because that was not my intention. Exactly. So I personally know a lot of white people who are not racist. Like, they don't mean to. Let me not say they're not racist, because they do things that are racist, but they don't mean to be. So I think in those situations, it's more about education than just ostracizing those people. I don't think that's productive in any way. I don't think that helps in any way either. Because I've seen a lot of people on my Instagram talking shit about people who haven't been sharing a lot of stuff on their socials, but I think what matters is they're trying to educate themselves. I agree. Even if it's private. I agree. It's all about education at the end of the day. And I touched on this earlier, because people get cancelled for not saying anything, but then people get cancelled for saying the wrong thing. And going back to like, that school that I went to is a good example, because those people were not racist, but like they didn't mean to be racist, but they were all white. And they were in an area that was all white. There were no black people in that area, and they had never met black people. So they just did not have any education on anything to do with like any bad culture, because that's not what they were taught. So they're just not aware of these things. So how do you expect that person to make a statement on racism and make a like statement that makes sense when they don't even really understand it? So I'd rather just let that person be silent and get educated on like what's going on. Because if they don't say anything, people are going to be like, oh, this person didn't say anything, they're cancelled. And then if they say something that's wrong, even if they're well-meaning, they get cancelled again. So once again, it's not helpful. That approach is just not helpful in any way. Yeah, exactly. The radical lefts are truly making the situation worse. I agree. Yes, that's the guy, by the way. Brock Turner, that's the guy. The rapist guy. Wait, they released him to preserve his career? Is that actually why they released him? Oh my God. See, I totally agree. I believe the extremists of far right and far left both cause some level of counterproductivity. Exactly. And I think, obviously, because I'm a bit like behind on the comments, but yeah, this is literally what I was saying earlier. Like, people who are like here or all the way here, both of these sides are like problematic because the approach is always combative. How do you think this current situation will affect the fashion world? Brands like Celine being called out. To be fair, brands being called out doesn't mean anything. Like every brand that's been called out, nothing happens really. Like Gucci got called out, Prada got called out. A year later, back to normal. So I don't really think it will have an effect. Like, if I'm being really, really honest. Especially coming from myself in Singapore, I think a lot of people find it very difficult to understand what is going on because the situation and culture here surrounding the police is so different. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Radical leftist ideologies are far more common in America. It's just that the alt-right is easy to spot. Yeah. There's also like a radical left in the UK as well, and an alt-right, and I don't agree with any of them. I don't agree with any of them. Like, but yeah, it's complicated. It's a really complicated issue. Really complicated. Yo, shout out to my auntie. What did my auntie say? I think it's not helpful to call people black or white as it promotes extremism because of the negative connotation with black. When we were children, we saw our different shades. I totally agree. I totally agree. That's facts. That's facts. American white people know it's bad to do blackface and still do it. I don't think I have the patience. Okay. So in places like America where they're very aware of the history, it's a bit different. That's a bit of a different situation. But yeah, if they don't know, then it's different. But if they know, I don't even know how to tackle. How do you guys should comment in the comments below. How do you tackle educating a racist person or changing the views of a racist person who is aware of how blackface is offensive and the history of it, but still do it anyway? That type of person is almost like a lost cause. Like, how do you even go about changing that person's opinions? Facts. I didn't know I was black until a white person told me. Facts. Let's see. It's crazy because in fashion, it seems like if you want to have normal appeal to everyone, it feels like a Caucasian model is ideal. I know it's weird because if you use like all black models on your runway, it's seen as like you're going out of your way to like have black models. But if you have all white models, it's just seen as like normal. It's weird. It's weird. There's a movie, Hurricane Carter, with Denzel Washington on the life of a black boxer in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Bob Dylan made a song on his life. Yeah, I mean, there's so many situations like that. There's the Central Park 5. There's so many situations. It's because white has been the norm in the West for centuries. Will take a while to break that one down. I agree. I've not experienced the store treatment as a white man, but that is truly sad. I have always experienced it. Do you know what? I have a video, right? You guys should watch this video after this live. So I have a video. So I was doing this series before like COVID-19 called Places to Shop in London for High-End Fashion. And I haven't actually finished it. So hopefully when this whole quarantine thing ends, I'll continue it because there's many more stores to go to. But in part 2 of that series, one of the stores I went to, it's literally in the video. They followed me around everywhere I went in the store. And like, I was the only person that they did that to. I spoke about it in the video. So you guys go and watch that video. Like, it happens all the time to me, but it's just like, it is what it is. It's sad that every time I walk into a high fashion store, I have to say hello to the front guard to make sure they don't start following me. Okay, so this is one of the reasons I don't like to walk into like department stores anymore. Like I don't go to stores like Gucci, Dior, Prada. I don't go to stores like that. I go to like stores, like consignment stores. So I go into stores like Layers, like Allotment, like stores where there's like one person who owns it, who's always there, and you can build a relationship with that store owner. And then it gets to the point where like you can just walk into the store and do whatever and like have fun. So now I don't even have a need to go into a Gucci store or like, because first of all, I don't even buy Gucci. I don't even wear Gucci. And secondly, the brands I do buy, they're sold by like people who have independent stores. So like Angelina Mista, you can buy it from those type of stores, or like Boris Bejanza Berry, or brands like Rick Owens. You can buy them from like those type of niche consignment stores. So I never really have a reason to go to a department store, because department stores are more likely to treat you like dirt because people just feel like they're above life. But if you go to like a consignment stores, it's more like community based. So yeah, the luxury stores in Florence are much less racist than the ones in New York. Really? That's interesting. That's interesting. Wow. Not to get into like past experiences, but I had an ex-girlfriend who was like half Italian, and she always used to tell me that like Italians are racist as hell. And she was probably a good person to have that perspective because she was half black, half Italian. So like she would experience a lot of racism because she was Italian, spoke Italian, and experienced so much racism when she went to Italy, because she used to go to Italy like all the time. So yeah, I've personally never really been to Italy, so I don't know that for a fact, but that's just what she said. I don't know much about Candace Owens, but I think she's just one of those like right wing like extremists. Like her views just don't make any sense most of the time. Once again, I don't like people that are like on the far end of each side. Yeah, I agree. Could not agree more that we need to have more civil conversations and not dismiss others' opinions. Yep, totally. When the riots happened, people had bleeding hearts for LV getting looted. Those stores don't give a fuck about us. That's facts. How you know they don't care is because when that building in what is it called, the Dame Notre Dame or something like that building, when that burnt down, all these brands were donating billions immediately. But with this issue, how much have they donated? So it just tells you where their priorities are. So personally, I don't know why people cared. Like I'm not a proponent, like I don't support violence in any form. However, I don't see why people are so like, oh my god, LV got looted. Like I personally don't care. The only black person in the store at the time, probably the only person that ended up buying something. Oh my god. There's this funny story that apparently Oprah Winfrey walked into the store and she wanted to buy this bag, and like they thought she couldn't afford it because they didn't know who she was. That's crazy. Like Oprah Winfrey would buy the store and buy the employees in the store. That's hilarious. I feel like dismissing their opinion is just going to push people away. Exactly. I agree. I totally agree. Oh, so Portland's in Oregon, not the other way around. Oh, okay. Wait, so Portland's in Oregon. So what, is Oregon the state? This is how you know I don't know anything about America. Lack of knowledge towards racism is kind of invalid, especially for people actively interested in streetwear, jazz, hip hop. They learn about the origins of the culture and understand the constant struggle. I think you're overestimating it. I don't think they do. I don't think by listening to hip hop you're now suddenly aware of like the history of Jim Crow and stuff like that. I don't think it works like that. Yep, this is facts. It happens with movies. A normal movie is almost always Caucasian, and any other race seems unnatural, or cultural documentary. That's facts. That is facts. That's facts. God damn, I'm so behind on these comments. I'm so sorry, guys. Completely agree with being in the middle. I feel like the most ironic thing is that the people on the far left always condemn bigotry, but they end up being hella bigoted as well. That's facts. That's facts. That's facts. Market research has also shown that people in foreign countries like seeing themselves on screen. This is why giant white films have less funding now, and movies like Parasite sweep the Oscars. That's interesting. Interesting. Let's see. Difference between being right-wing / left-wing and racist. Like Russia could be argued to be left because it is communist, However, racism is still heavily prevalent there. That's other facts. I'm not sure about the communism part, but yeah. Also, I don't really like saying too many bad things about China because once again, I'm scared of their government. Also, Russia, I don't want to disappear tomorrow. So let's keep discussions about Chinese and Russian government to the minimal, please. This is why it needs to be taught in schools in the future, regardless of if there's diversity or not. I agree. Those are capitalist dictatorships oppressing people and hiding behind communism of the past. It's sad when people only know black people from the media's portrayal. They're just human beings. There's no such thing as race. When you see a cow, you don't say what race it is because of its color. I agree. That's facts. And then you don't say like a black cow is like more aggressive than a white and black cow. Oh my God. I think people who are in the middle in politics are usually overwhelmed with the more extreme ones. I feel that a lot in discussions and it's frustrating. True. The two-party system also does suck. That's facts. Because it does promote choosing a side. It really does promote choosing a side. Yep. No diversity. Literally, as I say something, then like I'll read a comment about it. No diversity in opinion. You just got to choose one or the other. Facts. Funny how since so many people are out protesting now, we may start getting a herd immunity from Corona. That's actually so true. The silver lining in everything. I think the radical left and right side of politics stems a lot from the partisan system in the US, which is very sad because it seems to have spread around the world, which is quite strange because once it's removed from that system, it doesn't really make sense. True. There should be more tolerance. Everything is a spectrum. No one is 100% right. I agree. Herd immunity low key. Oh my. I go to a mostly white university. It's all rich New Englanders who have only been around white people their entire lives. It's almost like they don't know better, which is where, see, with those type of people, there's the opportunity for education and to actually like change their views. But it's whether you can change their views or not, it really comes down to how you approach it, in my opinion. I think social media is helping because it makes people aware of others that they don't live around. I feel like some people act racist/racial comments because they just knew they won't be called out. That's another thing. That's true. As a person of Italian heritage, I think there may be an undertone of fascism there. Once again, I'm not Italian. I've not been to Italy, so I can't really speak on that. So I'm just going to take your word for it as someone of Italian heritage. But yeah, I can't really form an opinion until I go to Italy like myself or I meet more Italian people. Based on my experience in uni, the general consensus there is that Italians can unfortunately be quite racist as well. Of course, this is just a sweeping generalization. Once again, I was just sharing like an opinion from my ex-girlfriend who was like half Italian. And she always used to say her Italian side of her family was racist as hell. I won't share like stories because obviously that's like personal, but like, yeah. Saw some people ripping on Harrods for putting out a Black Lives Matter statement when they're apparently sus on race. Well, a lot of brands are just using this situation as like a PR opportunity. So it's very important to realize that as well. Let's see. No shots, but it's interesting seeing that most YouTube/IG fashion brands like Start, Jacob, Hetzer, etc. are either always somewhat privileged Caucasian peoples or the POC's brands don't have exposure. I'm not too sure about that, only because I think there's just not that many like black people in our community. Like, let me think of like black people in our fashion community. There's Kyron, who doesn't have a brand really, and when he does, it sells out. There's Ray Mia, who has All Ray NYC, which from my understanding does well. I don't think that's the case. I feel like POC brands do well. If, like, for example, let me think of like Reggie Casual. I'm sure if he started a brand, it would do well. So yeah, and if we're gonna count Ken Ijima is a person of color. Well, his brand did really well. So, I mean, I'm not too sure about that. Maybe if you haven't experienced it yourself, you won't understand it fully, but now everyone is getting hurt, so maybe people understand the other side a bit more. Yeah, I guess so. There's something wrong, so that's ironic, with officers kneeling to show solidarity. Yeah. Those officers just posing so many minutes first. Yes, I've talked about the looting and Virgil. You guys have to watch it back. I'll try to make sure this live is not like too long, so guys can actually watch it back. Yeah, I'll try my best, guys. Thoughts on how Chrome Hearts yearly funds LAPD or how Supreme is partly owned by Carlyle Group that mines equipment? I did not know that. But yeah. So obviously LAPD. I just feel like police and prison in every single country in this world should not be privatized. When you privatize police or prison systems, that means you're giving people an incentive to arrest people and to put people in jail because there's a money value. Because I read somewhere that the reason why police arrest people for like really dumb reasons is because like police make a lot of profit by putting people in jail and then getting them to pay for bail. And then if those people can't pay for bail, because prisons are privatized, a lot of companies collaborate with prisons. So they'll make like prisoners work for like less than minimum wage for like cents on the hour. So they're getting like value for money from prisoners working. So the whole system is just all messed up, really messed up. So yeah. If you found out one of your favorite designers was racist, but they said sorry, but it was just how they grew up and they were trying to change their views, would you still buy and wear their clothes? It really depends on if I think they're being genuine by saying that. So it depends. It depends. Yeah, it really depends. Because there's designers I know who have grown up around white people their whole lives, and they haven't done anything that could be seen as racist yet. But if they did at some point, I wouldn't think it stems from like them being racist. I think it's just lack of education. And then there's other designers who I know are just outright racist, like Dolce & Gabbana, for example. Like if Dolce & Gabbana came out next week and said, oh, it was how we grew up, that would be BS. So it really depends. There's no black and white in anything in this life. So with this whole designers thing, I can't tell you for a fact, like across the board, I would say yes or no. It comes down to the individual and the specific situation. They don't want to lose their black customers because we are a big part of their money in addition to Asians. A case can be made that Asians is probably the biggest market. I've been reading a lot of like literature on like fashion business, and it seems to me like brands' priority now is getting Chinese customers because their economy is growing at such a rapid rate that their upper class is rising by the minute. So there's more and more and more people in China by the minute who have a lot of money, and therefore they're more and more luxury customers. So a lot of brands now are really, really focusing their attention on China. They're hiring people that speak Mandarin, Mandarin translators, Mandarin staff members, even in Europe, so that their Chinese customers can relate more to kind of like the store and the brand and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's weird because I don't see brands that take inspiration from like China. They never pay homage, but they're so just not genuine. Like they never pay homage to China when they take inspiration from China, but then they're trying to get the Chinese customer. I think brands, I think it's because they just don't care. So they just see everything as like PR. Like it's sad. It's sad. What do you think about Casey Neistat's video about the matter? I did not know he had a video about the matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to watch it. Let me just type it in and I'll watch it after this live stream. Casey Neistat. Interesting. Okay, I'm going to watch it later. All you can do is give people information. What they choose to do with it is up to them, and that's in regard to everything. You can't force anyone to do anything. You can only provide information. That's true. So doing these statements is a PR stunt to make it seem as if they care about us. Facts. And to be completely honest, I didn't even know the police in the US was privatized until now, which is shocking. Definitely a conflict of interest there. Yeah, facts. Have I ever been a victim of internalized racism? Not really, because I'm lucky that I moved to Nigeria when I was 9. So, okay, let me give you a good example. So, my name is Michael, but my Nigerian name is Odunayo. So Odunayo in short is Ayo, which people call me Ayo, Ayo, whatever they call me. But that's the short form of my African name. So when I was younger, it's so weird. People used to make fun of being African. Being African was a bad thing, which is weird because now it's cool to be African. Everyone wants to dance to Afro beats and stuff. Is weird. But basically, when I was younger, I did not have any pride in my name, and I was really ashamed of it and of my culture. And it wasn't until I moved to Nigeria and I started to learn about my culture and the richness of my culture, and I got really proud of it. And coming back to England after I'd lived in Nigeria, I was so proud of my name. So I think maybe I was a victim of internalized racism from a really, really, really young age before I moved to Nigeria. But after I moved to Nigeria, no way. I'm really proud of my culture. And to the point where now, before I used to let people call me Michael because that was my name. But actually now, if people don't call me by my African name, I take offense to it. Because what people do is they look at my passport, they see Michael there, and because that's the easier name to pronounce, they're like, Michael, and I'm like, no, that's the other name. And I take it upon myself to make sure that people pronounce my name right, in reality, in real life, because ultimately, I think it's this whole thing of and it stems from white supremacy, is that Black names are ghetto, or even though it's just a different language, because people can pronounce some complicated Russian and Swedish names, but when it comes to just pronouncing a very 3-syllable African name, people are struggling. I think it's because people just decide not to put any effort into it. So yeah, I totally agree. I agree. Do you agree the fashion industry in the West unwelcome Asian as so little Asian designers break through? I agree to an extent. Yeah, I do agree. Just from what I know, yeah. The fashion industry is not very welcoming to Black or Asian designers. But the good thing about being in, let's say, a Chinese designer is that the Chinese market is so massive that you don't need the West. People think everything is in the West. Not really, man. If you're Chinese or you're Asian, Japanese, trust me, there's a big enough market in Asia. K-pop artists get more views than big artists in the West. So who's a massive artist in the West? Katy Perry. K-pop groups are always going to get more views than Katy Perry music videos. That's just facts. So what does that tell you? It tells you that the Asian market has more power. There's more numbers. And the Asian market is even growing as we speak. So I feel people need to stop seeking validation from Western media and the West in general, especially if you're from Asia. Asia has a big enough market, because even if the West don't accept you, to be fair, fuck the West. Who cares? There's going to be a whole Asian market. That's why there's brands in China that are doing so well financially, and they're not that well known in the West. Brands like Shu Tong, or brands I don't know, Uma Wang, brands like that. They do so well in China. But in the West, not that many people know about them, but they probably earn. I bet I could almost bet money that brands like Shu Tong that are stocked in and around loads of stores in China probably earn more money than designers that are respected in the West. So I would go down on the limb and say that Shu Tong earns more revenue in a year than a brand like Kiko Kostanov that's like huge in the West. So, I mean, do you think Virgil donated more than 50 before he posted about it, or once he received backlash? I feel like he donated before he posted about it. That's just me personally. Yeah, I knew the American prisons and even their Federal Reserve is privatized. But to think that even the police, police is privatized, guys. In America, police is privatized. You probably talked about this, but how people in the UK typically think about the US, how the US is handling its protests. I've talked about this earlier. You're gonna have to watch the live back. So sorry. So sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna go and like skip to the current comments because I'm just so behind at this point. I feel like I'm never gonna catch up. So yeah, here we go. What do you say? Props to you on using your African name. A lot of Asian people I grew up with will just assimilate into Western culture and use their English name and try to denounce their own culture. That's true. I always wondered, why is it that when Chinese people come to England, they always have an English name? That's a bit weird. But yeah, me personally, I think okay, let me go into this deeper. So a reason why I got really proud of my culture was because, so when I went to Nigeria, once again, because my name is Michael, like they would ask me, what's your name? So I'd say Michael, and they'd be like, no, you're Nigerian. You must have a Nigerian name. So they'll say, what's your Nigerian name? And then I'll say Ojoayo, and then they'll be like, that's a beautiful name. And when I was in England, people used to make fun of my name. So now I've changed to like, I'm now in Nigeria where everyone's like, that's a beautiful name. Do you know the meaning of your name? That has a deep meaning. There's a deep history to your name. And then over time, when people tell you stuff like that, eventually you get proud of your name. So it depends. But yeah, people need to be more proud of their culture. There's more to this world than... I'm very sure I can pronounce Chinese names properly. I'm 100% sure. I'm very sure Chinese, and I know that because I have a lot of Chinese friends. Like, and I pronounce their Chinese names. So yeah. Yep, I agree. People are just waiting to cancel Virgil. Let's see. I think the exception to this West is best attitude in Asia would be Japanese designers because they've been embracing the Western world and are more well accepted. That's true. So designers like Rei Kawakubo, Yohji Yamamoto, but they had a hard time to get accepted. Let's not act like they were just accepted immediately. They got so much crap by the press. It seems that most people here in America mainly enjoy the Asian brands that take inspiration from American or European influences as opposed to Asian influence designs. That's really true. Because in the West, people laud brands like Number 9, The Soloist, Undercover, even Cavent that take a lot of inspiration from American and Western culture. But they denounce brands like Uma Wang, Shu Tong, Ziggy Chen, and those are brands that have influence their own culture. That's a really good take. That's a really good take. I think a lot of Asians know that no one will be able to pronounce their Asian names properly, so they just want to get over the hassle of explaining it and just have an English one. Fair enough. Yep, I'm definitely Yoruba, 100% Yoruba. When Asians, Chinese first immigrated to US, white people forced them to have English names, so it became the norm in the US. Not sure what the reason is in the UK. That's crazy. I didn't know that was a thing. That's insane. That's insane. Yeah. The reason why I talk about like Asians a lot, even though like Asians are racist, like not just every Asian, but Asian as a culture, Asians are so racist towards Black people. But Asians have also been susceptible to a lot of like racism, especially in like if we look at history. Like Asians used to get killed for fun in America. If you look at like history, it's insane that there's so many massacres of like Chinese people in America. If you look deep into the history of it, that I won't get into. Of course, I meant in this current time period, hopefully other designers from various ethnicities can break through in a similar way. Facts. By the way, guys, I'm really like my mouth hurts because I've been talking for 2 hours straight. So I'm going to share the link to the live stream in the chat, and you guys can join and share your thoughts and your opinions because I want to give my mouth a rest. Wait, hold on. Okay, yeah, someone just said, yep, 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. Exactly. Yeah. So once again, like it is not just like if you look in the history, it isn't just like black people. Obviously, black people have had the brunt to face. We've gotten the worst of it. But yeah. What time is it here? It's 10 a.m. So I literally woke up and I was like, let me do a live stream about racism because basically I've done a few live streams in the past about this stuff, but the thing is, I know people want me to talk about this before I start going back to my normal videos talking about fashion designers, and I thought it was important for me to talk about it. So yeah, what's good?
Oh, what's good? Yeah. So do you
Wait,
want me?
before you do anything, tell everyone about your channel because
Oh yeah. So I've started a channel recently during the quarantine, and I've really been inspired by people like IO, like Bliss, and by Kizzy as well. So I've noticed that there's a lot like because Bliss and IO make content mainly for high fashion brands, and I've not seen a lot of people delve very deeply into streetwear brands. So I wanted to do that, and I tried to fill in that void.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got some cool videos. I don't want to big him up too much, but he has like a good video on Casablanca and stuff. But yeah, you can like share your link in the chat or something, or maybe like share it in a private chat and then I'll share it for you.
Okay. Hold on. Let me put it up.
Yeah, I could tell you about Chinese racism against black people for days, because like I could get into it, but yeah, I won't. Because like some of my best friends are like Chinese from China, like from mainland China, so we talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah, I feel like where I am from Singapore,
Yeah,
especially because a lot of the Chinese people were immigrants from China
right,
originally. So like they're very like conservative and very traditional values. And
right.
because in Singapore we don't have a lot of black people, like to be honest, the first black person I've ever met, I met him when I was 18. So I think because of that, because of these already traditional values, and because we don't get to meet a lot of black people, it just fosters this kind of racism. But I feel like nowadays, especially because a lot of people in the Asian community, they were saying they will talk about this with your parents. So I think
Yeah,
it's getting better, like especially since this incident. But it's definitely something that's deeply rooted in Asian culture, unfortunately.
right. Oh, son said he's from Singapore.
Oh, shout out to you, man.
Do you think people are too afraid to wear certain culture specific? Personally, I don't think wearing a clothing item of someone from a different culture is cultural appropriation. Personally, I feel like that's appreciation. They're just wearing something from a different culture. I think when it becomes like appropriation is when you profit off of it. That's when it gets a bit muddy, or when you do it without referencing the culture or paying homage to the culture. That's when it gets more into like the negative appropriation. Let's see. Okay, this is a good question. Have you spoken about how any black designer gets thrown into the streetwear category, even though it's clearly not the genre they're creating? It's this weird mentality that like a black person can't design high-end fashion. So anything that a black person does is just like streetwear. So a good example is like Hood by Air. Till today, people think Hood by Air is streetwear, but it's actually avant-garde. But people still say it's streetwear. It's strange. Well, I feel like Mo Lola is the only one that managed to escape that term for a minute. Yeah, Mo Lola has no one calls herself streetwear. I hope that when she gets bigger, people don't try that. People did that to A Cold Wall. People do that to everyone. Telfa, like they just did it to everyone. Oh my. But yeah, tell me more about the like dynamics of Singapore
Yeah,
in terms
so
of the situation.
I think recently the thing is because I went to international school for like for college, so a lot of my friends are a lot more cognizant of what's happening in the US. But in general, a lot of people in Singapore, we find it very hard to relate to what's happening, especially in regards to police brutality. Because in
Right.
Singapore, I didn't know this at all, that the police in the US was privatized. So in
Yeah.
Singapore, the police is under the government and they are highly, highly trained. So this kind of thing would never, ever, like, okay, I wouldn't say never, but it's very, very unlikely that these kinds of issues would happen in Singapore, because especially if there's any police misconduct, it's dealt with so swiftly.
Yeah.
And especially with in terms of riots, we have this unit called the Gurkha unit, and they are basically it's like they're a foreign unit. And because
Yeah.
the reason why we have them is so that we can deploy them in these kind of high pressure situations, and no one can accuse them of racism because they're not Singaporean. So they don't
Right.
care who you are, they will just straight up enforce the law.
Right.
And I think because we have that kind of culture around the police here in Singapore, it's it's hard to imagine anything else, especially because I don't think people talk about the privatization of the police as much, as opposed to like you see a lot of Americans talk about the privatization of healthcare,
Right.
which is why I think a lot of Singaporeans are so very confused with the ACAB movement. You know what I mean? Because like for us, I think in Singapore, orders like peace and order is valued very highly. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, if you don't have police, like, how are you going to maintain order? It's just completely different to what I think we're used to.
Right. Someone said the government in Singapore is constantly censoring issues.
Yeah, that's true actually. I'm in two minds about this, because the thing is, the government does censor things, but most of the time when they censor things is because it's something like it's just false accusations or it's fake news.
Right.
So because Singapore has had a history of, like, long ago when we were starting out as a nation, there were a lot of issues of like racial riots, and because we are so like multiracial, so so the government's a lot more careful about these kinds of things. So they immediately, when someone tries to make an incendiary remark, they immediately like cancel that. They're like, no,
Right.
right? But I agree with our CSTO. He's saying that a lot of Singaporeans, a lot of people are speaking about the issue. I think the government does allow people to criticize the issue as long as people just don't make like baseless accusations.
Yeah.
Because some people in the past have done that, but like, is the government is recently become a lot more open-minded to criticism and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
When you say in Portugal, police it's from the government and there's still aggressive cases of racism. Yeah, because so the first step is obviously just not making it private. We're just saying that if it's privatized, it's worse, but it doesn't negate the issue ultimately. Because yeah, I know like police from outside of the UK, especially in parts of Europe, we think like their police is terrible because in England, for example, people just can't beat you up for just like absolutely no reason. But
Yeah.
I know friends who have gone to like places like Cyprus or countries like that where they just get brutalized by the police for absolutely no reason. I'm sure those are still like government funded police forces. So
I think it has
yeah,
to do with the culture of the government as well.
yeah. What did one say? The leaders are paying themselves ridiculous amounts of
Oh yeah,
money.
that's true. That's true. The our leaders get paid so much here.
Seriously?
Yeah, yeah.
Wait, like how much? What do you mean by like
Like,
so much?
I don't know the exact numbers, and I also don't want to get arrested for saying the wrong thing. But
Okay,
it's
be
definitely
careful.
a
Be
lot.
careful.
Yeah, but it's definitely a lot more than other countries. but they have said that the reason for that is because it's trying to prevent corruption. Because if there, I feel like the logic is that there are some countries whereby there's a lot of rampant corruption in the government, and that's because they are tempted to take bribes because like
Yeah.
they feel like they don't earn enough.
Right.
So Singapore is like they pay them more, so they're not tempted to take bribes, but they also like they clamp down so hard on corruption as well.
Oh wow.
I feel so. I think that's what they say.
Wow. What do you say? How is it learning about your country's history? Because I'm from the US and you barely learn about. Is he talking about me or you? I'm not sure who he's talking about.
Not sure.
Yeah, can you clarify?
Well, as to learning about our like Singapore's history, I think there's definitely an element of it being more tailored to fit a certain narrative. But I
Right.
mean, I suppose it's good intentions because the narrative is because Singapore we pride ourselves a lot on like multiculturalism and multiracialism, even though there may be there's still people are saying that there's still some forms of systematic racism here. But I
Yeah.
feel like compared to other countries, the overt racism is less. I think that a bigger issue here in Singapore is xenophobia. So because of that, when we learn about our country's history, we learn a lot about like the racial issues of the past, and that's emphasized a lot so that we recognize the importance of like getting along with other races and all that.
Yeah. Okay, so you said both. Okay, moving back to my country of origin, Nigeria. I just realized that like the West is just full of crap. Like, so when I first went to Nigeria, because they feed you these lies about like what Africa looks like, what Africa is, it's like underdeveloped, all of that. So I genuinely thought when I was going to Africa that like there was gonna be huts and like it was gonna be weird, like messed up, because that was what I was young. How old was I? I was like 8, so I didn't know any better. So that was what I was fed. And then first thing, I land in Nigeria and it's like this massive airport, and I'm like, are we in the right place? And then I walked outside the airport and it just looked like any other city, and I was like, is this Nigeria? And then they're like, yeah. And then people were driving cars, and then people even drive like more expensive cars than like in the UK. So for example, in Nigeria, you see like cars like G wagons, Bentleys, just all the time, whereas in England you barely see that. So then I realized, wow, I've been fed lies, and like everything in the West is in England just the same way as KFC in England. There's KFC, and like, and it was so crazy to come to the realization that wow, I've really been fed lies. And like even the school system, so university in Nigeria isn't fantastic, but at every level, primary school and secondary school kids in Nigeria are always smarter than like European kids. Because I remember when I went to Nigeria, so what we were doing in like primary school is what kids do at the end of like in the middle or end of secondary school. So like I remember when I was in primary school in Nigeria, we were doing quadratic equations and I was lost because I came from England. I'm like, what is this? Whereas in England, that's what you learn like later on in like high school. In Nigeria, you learn that in primary school. Like Nigeria is so complicated that like, okay, let me tell you, I'm not sure how many guys study chemistry, but like, so in the English curriculum, it's so easy that like they teach you about 3 families in like hydrocarbon chain, because you know I did chemical engineering, like chemistry, but in secondary school level anyway, they teach you about alkanes, alkenes, and alkynes, right? But in Nigeria, they teach you about 20 so it's way harder. So like anyone who comes from like Nigeria who study chemistry so our thing is called like WAEC, like that's our like council. They come to England and it's so easy. And it's so funny because in the West, they make you think that like black people are dumb. They have this low IQ. And then me going to Nigeria and coming back, I'm like, English people are daft. They're dumb. They don't know. Like, what? These guys are stupid. They're like struggling with like alkenes, alkynes, and alkanes. Like go to Nigeria, we learn about 20 different families. So I think my time in Nigeria really helped with like just national pride and just realizing, like being proud of where I'm from, and just realizing that the West will just feed you lies and just a lot of people don't know any better, and it's
I think
unfortunate.
yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is that I think that kind of mindset, like people talk about this all the time, is that it sort of stems from, colonialism. Because like last time because Singapore was a colony as well, so people would just like the British would come or like the Dutch would come or whatever, and they'd be like, "We're gonna civilize you." That was their thinking, right? So I feel like unfortunately, like maybe subliminally its influence is still felt until now. Like when I went to uni, like my friends were asking me all kinds of questions like about Asian culture, and like I know they didn't mean like badly, but like they were asking questions because like so my name is Richard, right, and I have a
Yeah,
Chinese name as well. So I showed they were like, so which one's your real name? I was like, what do you mean they're both my real name, bro? I showed them my identity card. They're like, what? It's like they don't mean badly, but because they're not educated about it, they just don't
yeah,
know any better.
yeah. That's the thing. That's what I was saying, because I don't think all of them mean bad. I genuinely don't think they mean to be offensive. They just say things without realizing it because they're just not educated on the matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's crazy, man. Like going to Nigeria, when I just realized, wow, like we've been sold lies.
Mhm.
Like, and it's so funny because then so the school I went to that was like predominantly white, people used to ask me some dumb questions. Like I remember someone asked me if there's like electricity in Africa, or I heard someone ask me if there's internet
Bro.
in Africa. So but I always make them feel stupid. Like I always make it my goal to make them feel dumb. So the person that asked me, is there internet in Nigeria? I said, no, there definitely isn't. The first time I ever used the internet was just now, like literally, like I just learned to use the internet. And she's like, oh, sorry, no, I didn't mean to. Or like there was another person who said, it was something to do with like when I was going to school in Nigeria, and obviously like every normal person, I was driven to school, or you take a taxi to school, or you go on a bus to school, like every other country, or you walk to school. But she was like, I read somewhere that Africans like ride elephants to school, and I was like, yeah. Basically, what I used to do, I used to ride this elephant to school, and then I'd hop off the elephant, and then literally swim across the Atlantic Ocean, and then get to school. And she was like, "Oh, really?" I was like, "No, you idiot! Like, do you know how big the Atlantic Ocean is? How can a human being swim across the Atlantic, you dumbo?" Like,
Jesus
so
Christ.
the thing is, I think they're so like they've been fed such rubbish that sometimes they don't even listen to themselves when they speak. Like, how can someone tell you they swam across the Atlantic and you actually believe it? That's how bad it is.
Jeez.
So some people genuinely think that there are parts in this world where there's like no electricity or no internet and stuff like that. It's insane.
Yeah, I didn't realize it would be that bad in the UK or like even the US, because I would have thought that because like you guys have obviously a bigger proportion of black people than like
Yeah,
let's say countries like Singapore. So I would think that you would know about other ethnicities,
yeah.
but I guess not.
It depends though, because like, so when people think of the UK,
Mhm.
people think of London.
Oh, because you were in
And
Kent, right?
yeah, so I was naive because
Mm.
my whole life I always lived in London. Like even when I moved to Nigeria, my family was still in London. So like every holiday I used to come back to London, like every single one. So I lived in London my whole life essentially. So I was in a multicultural city, so I took it for granted because no one's really racist because everyone just grew up around everyone's culture. Maybe their parents are racist, but people my age not so much. But when I went to this school in Kent, I didn't know places like in England, but majority of England is like that. But I just was like oblivious to it because I grew up in London. So this area was white, like no black people in sight, none. So much so, like these are the type of people that they've been to London like once in their life for like a holiday. So like the whole village mentality, they've all been around this like area full of white people. There's no black person there, so they've never met any black person in their lives. Like genuinely, a lot of people said, like, Ayo, you're the first black friend I've ever had. You're the first black person I've ever been able to talk to. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I didn't know there are areas in England like that, which are that white. But then that's the most of England because think about it. It's a European country. I was just oblivious because I was just in a multicultural, tiny part of England. So I didn't realize that, oh, yeah, actually, most of England's probably just all white areas.
Yeah, actually, I remember, I think I told you about this in another live stream. I was like, yeah, some of my friends from Kent. I'm like, what? They're like a different species, man. Like the things they do, I'm like, what is that?
Yeah. That's crazy, though, that you know some guys in your uni from Kent. Yeah, those guys are different.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of learning to do.
Yeah.
Oh, my. What he said, it's just they never learn about its ignorance. In the US, we don't learn about the East, and it's just what you've seen on TV, which is barely anything, is what you know. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, what do you say? I feel like in Singapore, the government actually did a good job in making sure the different races learn about each other's cultures.
Yeah,
Interesting.
In Singapore, we have this thing called Racial Harmony Day. So, like, when I was in school, we would come in dressed in like our cultures, like traditional garments, and we would learn more about like different like cultures and all that.
Oh wow, that's dope.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really heavily emphasized here, especially given our past.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine this in the US as well. There's areas in the US that some people have never had black friends. Yeah, I've heard like things about America concerning that. Colonialism should be better explained in schools. Portuguese history program when I was in schools would glorify too much the effect of colonialism and colonies. It is changing, but slowly. Yeah, that's problematic. Yeah. Wait, to go on a tangent, what's the Singaporean fashion scene like? I'm really curious.
Well, the only Singaporean brand I've known that's gone like more mainstream in the West is this brand called Youths in Balaclava.
Okay.
But with regards to like high fashion and all that, it's pretty much dead because I think I told you I spoke about this with you on Instagram. Like most people here, the only like high fashion brands they know are like Vetements and like Balenciaga and all that, or Gucci, and they just wear like the oversized Vetements shirt and they wear shorts and they wear a high pair of sneakers and that's like the uniform. They're like, oh, sick man, I know that fashion. It's like, bro, but I think it's also quite restrictive because like Singapore is so hot. Like when I went to the UK,
that's true.
I was so happy because I was like, oh, I can layer and shit.
Yeah,
but,
you
like,
can't be wearing like avant-garde Yoji jackets and it's too hot for that.
Like, bro, you try to dress up here, it's just you're gonna die straight up. It's not.
That reminds me of Nigeria because like people that have money in Nigeria, basically the same. They wear like a Gucci tee, some shorts, and then sandals. Yeah. But like people be flexing with the sandals though. People be wearing all types of different sandals and
Nigeria. Yeah, same, yeah.
Gucci sandals, Dior sandals, Chanel sandals. Like they go off with the sandals.
Yeah, it's mad.
Wait, someone said during Racial Harmony Day, we would even get to eat multi-ethnic food from food stores. That's really good.
That's true. That's true.
That's really cool. Wait, what? He said they would say we were good colonizers. That's problematic. Damn.
He's asking about the virus in Singapore. So like the virus in Singapore, it's like getting better, but we are still. They restarted the economy recently, but we still can't go out to socialize and all that. So the government's being very, very cautious, which is fair enough because it'd be kind of dumb to shut down twice. That would not be good.
What if it's like Oregon is weird, kind of like the UK. I feel like Portland and Eugene are kind of diverse, but that's it. Everywhere else is super white and feels way different than Portland. Yeah, I can imagine. It's just so insane because my whole life I just thought London was how the whole UK was, and then I got a culture shock real quick, real fast. Let's see, majority of most Singaporeans involved with fashion care about being a hype beast or wearing fast fashion.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think in Singapore, sneaker culture is a lot bigger than high fashion. That's how I got into fashion anyways. It's through sneakers. And like the sneaker community here is huge.
Yeah. That's crazy. Because even China's like really divided in that. So like in China, they really love basketball. So there's a big sneaker culture that has stemmed from people's love of like basketball and basketball culture and stuff like that. And then there's a whole other side of Chinese people that are exclusively into like avant-garde and those type of things. Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm trying to figure out how people get into those spaces.
Yeah, like in Singapore, I can count on one hand the number of stores that stock like high fashion brands and all that. Like even here,
Yeah.
we have stores from Loewe, um, stores like or Bottega Veneta, but they like people don't know them for their high fashion stuff or their runway
Yeah.
stuff. They know them for their leather goods.
Yeah. Like I don't look at Gucci or Louis Vuitton as fashion brands really. That I really look at them as leather goods
That's true.
brands. Yes, they try to get designers that are really creative to try and change the perception. So like people like Alessandro Michele at Gucci and stuff like that, or people like Marc Jacobs at Louis Vuitton. But for me, it's just the basis of it isn't clothes. So
That's true.
I just don't really see those as like real fashion houses. I
Mm.
see places like Dior as fashion
Yeah.
houses or like Balenciaga.
Yo, in Singapore, Dior, just saddlebags, B23 is done. That's it. The course collab. My friend is the course collab. He's like, yeah, look at Dior. I was like, calm down.
But isn't Singapore, in Singapore, a lot of people have a lot of money from what I know. Because my uncle used to live there.
Depends, because there's people always talk a lot about the income inequality in
Right.
Singapore. There's a big split because what a lot of people see about Singapore, especially in movies like Crazy Rich Asians, is they see like the central business district. So like Marina Bay
Right.
Sands and all that, like the shiny glitz and glamour. And that's why people always say that, oh, Singapore's dead. There's like not much culture, it's all very organized.
Yeah.
But you gotta go to the heartlands where like the government housing, all that is. And that's where you find like your average Singaporean. And
Okay, that's interesting.
also, I know
That's
a
a
lot
good
of
take. Yeah. Because I always see like just the mainstream stuff and it just makes
Yeah.
it look like Singaporeans are just like rich.
Yeah, the thing is, people always focus on that one area of Singapore.
Yeah.
And also like I think I know a lot of people when they wear like Balenciaga or Vetements, but it's all like from Taobao, it's all fake. So
Yeah.
shut the flex.
Yo, what's up?
Hi,
Can you
guys.
hear me?
Hello.
Yo, what's up?
Fine. Yeah.
He's a bit back. I think he's a bit frozen.
Yeah.
You can hear me.
Yeah, you're like a bit frozen though. But let's give it a second. I think you're
maybe it's the
okay. Yeah,
camera.
you're still a bit frozen. What does someone say? Singaporeans save money like crazy.
Wait.
Oh, so they're talking about like the average Singaporean then.
Yeah, I think there's a diversity of opinions here because like people who are raised in like more traditional households, their parents like save money, and you're like, oh shit, okay. But like a lot of Singaporeans that I know, they just love spending money. I'm like, bro, calm down. Like, what are you doing?
What do you say? But yeah, somehow a lot of Singaporeans who wear clothing for clout. I've got a friend who's a nice down to earth guy, but even he then buys expensive shirts because he wants to impress people. That's interesting.
Because like even when we go on like nights out to the clubs and all that, everyone's just like, you just look around, it's like Balenciaga, Gucci, like Vetements everywhere. So I think that's the culture now.
Yeah. Not gonna lie, Taobao is dope, but it just depends. If you're getting like fakes, then no. But there's like people like, so a lot of designers will like study at like CSM or like a design school, and then it's just easier for them to set up a shop on Taobao. So you can find hidden gems on Taobao, just like designers making their own collections. Like trust me, you can find insane stuff. So it depends. It depends. But yo, what's up? I think you're like moving normal now. It's no longer freezing.
Okay, it's normal. Okay.
Okay, no, it's a bit back.
Yeah.
It's a bit laggy.
Let me do without video, so you can hear me.
Okay, yes, it's a lot better this way. Yeah. So share your thoughts on the topic.
Good. Okay, like Italy team is present. Like our Italy experienced a lot of those years. Like people deny it. Like, oh, you're not racist, or we are all like racist to immigrants or other stuff, but we are still in the same situation as US and other parts of the world.
Right. Wait, you live in Italy, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard stories about Italy, but like I said, I have no like personal experience. So what do you say your personal experience is like being black living in Italy?
Mm, like mostly, I don't know. Like during school, you have like the same insults, like you're monkey, you're all Itanos, or like you are poor, of course, because you're black. The same bullshit
Right,
as usual.
right,
And then like, hmm? And then like from the society in general, like for example, when I go to the bus, like if you don't have the ticket, you will be like bullied or like insulted, and
Wait,
like
really?
mostly
Like for not
usually
having a
like for
ticket?
white people they don't check yes, yes, from the driver, because
Wow.
like usually when I go to the bus, like to Italian people, they don't check the ticket. When I come in, they always yell like, "Do you have the ticket? Do you have the ticket?" Because they think I'm an immigrant that doesn't have the ticket and that wants to take the bus free. So I'm always
Right,
like ready with the ticket to like check, because if not, I'll get bullied or insulted
right.
for that reason.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Jeez.
crazy. Even like I go in the shop, like the ones that work there, they think that I will steal or something else, so they will come near me and say, "Oh, you know that you have to pay, right?" I say, "Yes, of course, I know that I have to pay. I'm not here for no reason."
Yeah.
So like,
Wow, that's insane. That happens in England, but not to that
yeah,
extent. That's crazy. Like, yeah, not to that extent, but it definitely does happen here as well. What does someone say? I'm in Malaysia right now, and the only fashion is rich kids wearing flexi black tees of some brands, black skinny jeans, and a vape. Completely a vape.
That's so true. That's so true.
Oh my.
But man, that's crazy about Italy. I didn't know that kind of shit still happened there.
Yeah, I've heard stories about Italy.
yeah, it's crazy.
Does it depend on where so like say if you're in a big city like Milan, is racism less than say a more rural area? Would you say
Yeah.
that's like the case in Italy?
Mm, yes, like yes, I think so. Yeah, like in Milan, Rome, Florence is less, but not a lot. But yeah, rural area is worse.
Damn. Yeah, that's insane. I, yeah, that's crazy. Wait, what did someone say? Even outside of design, the most popular shirt is probably the Adidas Trifle logo tee. It's all about logos, I guess. Interesting. Someone said black in Italy getting harassed like crazy. Damn. Yeah. I personally,
Yeah.
that's why I said it's good to get your perspective because obviously I've been to Italy once, but like it doesn't count because like I was in Milan for like 5 hours. It was like a transit flight. So I haven't really been there to experience it.
Mhm.
And then also because I don't speak Italian and I know Italians are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like basically, if you don't speak Italian, they'll look down on you, especially if you're like non-white. Like they'll just think like you're an
Yes,
idiot.
yes, it's true. It's true.
Yeah. So from what I know,
Yes,
I'm just
yes,
like,
it's true.
I'm not too sure about Italy. Not gonna lie. The only reason I'll go to Italy, to be fair, is Milan Fashion Week, and I'm trying to go in and leave quickly. I don't have any intentions to experience prejudice. But someone said you can even tell from football. That's true.
Yeah,
Like all the cases of people throwing bananas at black
it's true.
football players and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think I read about it with Balotelli from years ago.
Oh yeah, I remember that when he used to play for like what was it?
Yeah, Balotelli. Yeah.
Milan, or AC Milan, or one of them.
Yes, Milan. Yeah.
But it's weird though because Balotelli used to play for the Italian national team,
Mm.
and like he was like he should be a hero. Do you know how many goals he scored that like put them so far in like competitions? Like I think Italy was in the Euro finals one year, and it was because Balotelli was like kept scoring goals like last minute.
Yes, yes,
It's crazy. Like people just have this like weird
yes.
mind.
I think some people may be thinking because if I'm not wrong, Balotelli wasn't born in Italy, right? He was born in Africa.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was
So like,
adopted by an Italian
Yeah.
family.
I think some people have that kind of mindset
Yes, it
because
was
in Singapore,
adopted.
yeah, because in Singapore, a lot of our like last time we used to be quite dominant in table tennis, and they were all from like born in China. So even some Singaporeans are like, oh, it's not a real medal because they're not true blue Singaporeans. It's like, bro, what? They're playing for our countries. Calm down, Jesus Christ.
But there's a reason. So the reason why Balotelli personally plays for Italy is because he said that his parents neglected him, and an Italian family accepted him and adopted him. So he feels more Italian than he feels African because that's who accepted him in life. So he feels like he has to give back to like Italian heritage, and then they repay him by like throwing banana peels at him.
Jeez, that's disgusting.
It's crazy.
It's just-
What do you say? No, I really have to hone in on my Italian because I want to source my brand. Yeah, bro. If you don't speak Italian in Italy, they look down on you, bro. Especially if you're not white. Yeah, it's gonna be rough.
Then now that I think of it, like Samuel Ross moved to Italy to Milan, right?
Yeah, he did. Like his production is all in Milan. I'm like,
Damn.
I don't know how he's faring there. Like,
Yeah.
geez. I genuinely have no intentions of doing any kind of production in Milan. If I don't do it in London, I'm gonna do it somewhere in France. Like Italy is just, man, I don't know how this guy does it because the stuff I've heard in Italy is just insane. How do you say? Just learn to invest, make your money make money, then buy whatever you want without worry. That's facts. That's facts. Oh yeah, by the way, you need to talk about your YouTube channel as well before I forget. Let everyone know.
What, me?
No. He has a
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
channel as well.
Not me.
Yeah,
YouTube channel. Yeah, I about vintage fashion thrifting, general.
Yeah, more like vintage, thrifting stuff. Right.
Yes, exactly. From different decades and explore them.
I've answered this question like a billion times, honestly. I think you're just gonna have to watch the live stream back. I'll end it at 3 hours so it isn't too long, so people can actually watch it back. She said, I don't get why Singaporeans just tab out everything.
Yeah, it's because everyone here is like the hype beast mindset, so they just want to flex. And because not a lot of people are into high fashion, so they don't understand the value of clothes.
Yeah. So it's just like if I can get the logo and flex it.
Yeah, straight out.
I really don't understand flex culture. I just never really understood it really.
Yeah, I don't get it either. But
Yes, same.
Wait, let's see. How many people in this live? 46. Before I end the live, I'm gonna end it in like eight-ish minutes. Guys can ask questions about fashion real quick. I've been learning a couple of languages. My mother is Haitian. My cousin was born in France. And us half French. So I'm learning French as my main language currently, but I'm going to grind Italian. Damn, so you're trying to learn Italian and French. Jeez. My word, that's
Oh, that's
tough.
difficult.
That's tough. Italian is closer to languages like Spanish, and then French is just like that's tough.
Yes, and Portuguese. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if you speak Italian, it's easier to learn Portuguese than
Yes.
Spanish, but then French is just separate from all of that.
Yeah.
Like that's tough.
Yes, exactly. Like I've been like 5 months. Yeah.
Yeah, like in fact, sometimes I get confused between like Italian and Spanish because some of the words are so similar. I'm like, are they speaking Italian or is it Spanish? Someone's asking you. Someone's
Yeah,
asking
so
you what you
true.
wear, Rich. What you wear
Oh,
in Singapore?
it's Singapore. So like it's a bit difficult for me to say because I just came back from the UK, because I'm studying there. And before I left, I wasn't as into fashion, so I just wore like joggers, sneakers, and t-shirt. But now I'm trying to play a lot more of like silhouettes. So like I've got into like more like wider pants or like oversized tees and just playing around with the silhouettes because that's honestly that's all you can really do. You can
Yeah.
accessorize, you can play the silhouettes, or you could buy logos, which is I think why a lot of Singaporeans do that. But it's hard.
What do you say? Get the logo and flex was my first introduction of fashion. It's kind of like, hey, look, I know an expensive, less common brand than you, and this is what it is. Vetmonts. Hypebeastism spreads fast. That's fact. I can't hate on it though because everyone needs a starting point. So you can't hate someone for being at a starting point of somewhere. So everyone probably does the whole flex thing before they find what they like, whatever that might be. If they might go deeper into high-end fashion or avant-garde or streetwear or
Yes.
I don't know, vintage, all different styles. But
Yes.
I think most people that's like their starting point.
Yeah.
So I can't really hate it, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely was my starting point.
It's a means to an end.
Yeah.
But it is funny to see though when people genuinely come up to you on like, yo, I'm wearing this brand, like I've got more drip than you, and I'm just like, like,
Your CG play here is huge.
Bro, chill, like
seriously.
shit.
Wait, what the hell? This guy is a language connoisseur. I took Spanish and I'm far into learning French. I started learning Italian as well. It's not that hard when learning some Spanish and some French. Jeez. Yo, you need to teach me how to learn languages because I want to learn Mandarin. I want to learn Mandarin, which is one of the hardest languages you can learn.
Yo, I can barely speak Mandarin. That's my mother tongue. I'm just like in school, right? We used to have exams. Right? We used to have a oral exam. So like one part was to read a passage, right? And I didn't know any of the shit. So I was like, oh shit. So like you had to sit in front of the exam and I read it out. So I just held it super close to my face. I just mumbled the whole time. And
that's your mother tongue, bro. That's not helping my chances.
Dude.
Of trying to learn Mandarin.
Yeah.
To be fair, I came from a school where we traditionally weren't like good at Chinese, so that makes it. But it's difficult because it's not like other languages where like it's phonetic. It's all it's all symbols. So you're just like what?
Yeah, it's like so pinyin, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get my head around pinyin and like where you put the lines.
Yeah.
And what sounds that. So you know how they have those like all them different sounds just for one letter. That stuff is so confusing.
Yo,
like why does one spelling have like 6 different pronunciations and 6 different meanings? Like what?
Yo, in Mandarin it's not that bad because it's only 4. In Cantonese it's like 6 or 7, and it's just like
wait. So Cantonese is actually harder to learn than Mandarin.
Cantonese is harder for sure.
Oh damn! I didn't know that.
Because
that's weird.
I think Mandarin is somewhat the best to learn because it's like the lingua franca of like China.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. So I would have thought that people just learn Mandarin if it's easier. Hey, what is this guy saying? Me and my girlfriend got searched like crazy at the Singapore airport. Was guessing because we were both heavily tattooed.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Singaporeans have some.
For sure, dude. For sure. Like, it's getting better because a lot more young people are getting tattoos. But like all the old people here, like, oh my god, you have a tattoo. Because like we used to have a lot of like secret societies here, or like gangs, and they all used to have tattoos and shit. But even now, it's like I want to get a tattoo, but I don't want to get disowned by my parents. so I'm not gonna do that.
That would happen to me. In Nigeria, oh my god, you get into problems for the tiniest thing. Like, bro, if you have like a weird hairstyle, like if you have dreadlocks, the police will just arrest you, bro. They'll be like, they'll say, what would they say? They'll say like, you're up to no good based on your hairstyle. That's how like conservative it is. Bro, it's crazy.
So strange.
It's mad.
Yeah,
Duolingo, my friend. Try to listen to the music for some people that speak the language. What? So Duolingo, what's that for? What language? Is that French? Or what is that?
I think you learn like several languages.
Duolingo is the best. Yes.
Yeah.
What makes it good though?
Yeah, I've learned Portuguese with Duolingo.
Really? Is it that good?
Because
It's
they
like,
teach you like in steps. So like they go from the
it's divided
basic.
in lessons.
How often do you have to like use it before
Every
you
day,
start
yes.
learning? What, every day?
Yeah.
Wow.
But it
That
only
means
takes a few minutes.
I've got to commit to this Mandarin.
I don't know if they're Mandarin and Duolingo though. I'm not actually sure.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it'd be hard with the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What'd she say? I feel. Oh yeah, she's Italian, right? I'm guessing. Oh no, she's Portuguese. Yeah, she's Portuguese because she said she was from Portugal. Yeah. Yeah, Portuguese. Those three languages are just so close, man. Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian. But Portuguese and Spanish are closer than Italian. It's crazy.
That's true.
But it's weird because I went to Portugal like a few years back. I went to Cascais, and in Cascais they all just speak English, which is weird. I thought they'd just speak Portuguese and stuff. But actually, people speak English.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, like literally, a lot of people there speak English. I was surprised.
That's strange, actually. Like,
I think maybe it might be
that's strange
because it's like
I lived in Portugal for 5 months.
Wait, oh, you lived in Portugal for 5 months. Where did you live though?
Yes, I lived in Beja, that's 2 hours from Lisbon.
Oh, okay.
In the south of Portugal.
Because you would expect that people there would probably
really
speak,
interesting.
Yeah, more English. Because Cascais, like, let me see where Cascais is. Like, where's the closest city to it is? Like, because you would think Cascais is like semi-rural in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, it's on the coast. Yeah, it's really far from Lisbon. Like, really far. That's interesting. Strange. I guess it's just a European. Ah, there we go. So it said Cascais is for rich people like the Portuguese posh area. Okay, that could be the thing. Because a lot of tourists go there. So maybe that's why.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's like areas like Thailand and Indonesia where a lot of tourists go. Most people can speak English.
Yeah. And I was surprised, like, Portuguese people are dark as hell. Like, sometimes I even forget they're white. Like, they're so tanned. Like,
yes, that's true.
Guys are so tanned. That's like basically how Europeans want
because
to look like.
It's really hot.
Yeah, that's what Europeans want to look like. That's why
people get
because
then it's really hot.
Wait, someone said Cantonese is harder for sure. Mandarin is created to unify the different dialect used in different areas of China. Oh wow, I didn't know that. I'm getting a full education.
Yeah, because in China there's all kinds of different dialects, so they use Mandarin as like the lingua franca. So even my grandparents, they all speak different dialects.
Yeah. Oh shit.
But I think most people know Cantonese because that's what they speak in Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's Hong Kong is Cantonese, and I know mainland for the most part is Mandarin. What do you say? I'm from Cascais, and that is not the reality. So from down, there's a lot of Portuguese people here. Wait, so what he's saying, or he or she, are you saying that the reality is that it's not an area for rich people then? Duolingo has issues, but it's free and an amazing way to learn. I feel like it's more beneficial when you've already got some knowledge of the language. Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I've been learning Mandarin, but just the basics. But even the basics to get my head around it is just so hard. Okay, so he said it's a fisherman village originally. That's because of a small part of the district that has a lot of bank owners and football players. People think. To be fair, all I know about Cascais is it was nice. That's all I remember.
That's not a bad thing to know about it.
And the weather was nice. The weather was nice as hell. And I also didn't experience any racism as well. So shout out Portugal. Basically, they want to say they live.
Yes.
Okay, so people from the beach then. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so this person's from Hong Kong. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Is it transferable though? So like if you learn Cantonese, does that make it easier to learn Mandarin? Like is there any
No.
crossover?
Only
Really?
in the text. And even then, because in Chinese there's two
That
kinds
deep?
of text. There's simplified Chinese, which is what we know in Singapore, and there's traditional Chinese, which I believe is what they use in Hong Kong. So like speaking it is not gonna help. And even like if you can read it, you gotta know how to read both texts.
Wow.
Yeah.
So simplified is more like the Hong Kong and then
No, so simplified is more of what is like the more common one, but Hong Kong uses traditional. if I'm not wrong. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. I don't think I'm ever gonna be able to read Mandarin. That's a whole different world, but I
Yeah,
just want to speak it.
Yeah, you gotta focus on speaking it.
That's a whole different level of I don't even want to get into learning to read Mandarin. That stuff looks crazy to me. What do you say? The written language is the same, is it?
Technically it's the same word, just written in different forms.
Right. Because like my Chinese friends will write me messages, but like forget. So they'll write it to me in like Mandarin characters.
Right.
And I'd
Yeah.
be like, bro, like I don't know what this means.
I mean, if you give the text to someone who speaks like Hokkien, Teochew, people all understand it. It's just that the way that it sounds is different.
Oh.
So
So
it all
that's
means the same
okay
thing.
then, because that means then that if you're Chinese, you could quite easily communicate with someone who doesn't speak Mandarin but speaks Cantonese if you just write it down.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose.
Oh wow. Oh, okay.
But I tried to speak like Mandarin in Hong Kong. I got yelled at. They were like, "Oh," that's like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry." Because like already as it is, my Mandarin is not great. So like it's always hard to understand. And then like in Hong Kong, they like because they all speak Cantonese, so they're like, "What the hell?"
And isn't there like tension between like mainland and
Oh,
Hong
yeah, for
Kong?
sure. Like
Yeah.
I always tell people, like the number one way to start shit is if you call Hong Kong part of China, people will be pissed. Same with Taiwan as well. Like you say that Taiwan's part of China, they'll be pissed.
Damn. Wait, what do you say? That's the problem with Chinese too. There's no way of knowing how to pronounce a character until you learn it. Not
That's
like
why most
spelling.
people learn first.
Yeah. Jeez. Jeez. Guys, you're helping my confidence in learning this language.
I mean, you
Jeez.
want to learn this conversation, it's fine. It's easy.
No, I'm determined I'm gonna learn it though, but we'll see.
Just go through it.
Because I feel like Mandarin's a really important language and like everyone learns French. Personally, I don't feel like okay, this is gonna sound bad, but like before I learn languages like Spanish, Italian, French, whatever, I would rather learn Mandarin because if I go to France now, there's gonna be enough people to speak English that I could get by. But that's not really the case with like China. So for
Well,
now, I feel like it's more important.
I guess if you learn Mandarin first as well, it just gives you the confidence to learn other languages. Because like,
Well, yeah, because this is hard as hell. He said, "Let's not demoralize you further." Yo, don't. Hey, in 1 year, I might open the live streams in discussion with Mandarin. You never know. I might just surprise you. Okay, I'll say this is the last question because I actually need to work on a new video, but I'll let you answer this.
So the scenes because I watched it quite long ago, but the scenes that I remember, like the huge house and all that, it's like there are houses like that in Singapore, but it's definitely not the norm. And I think a lot of it was obviously exaggerated because it's a cinema and like movie magic and shit like that, right? But like it wasn't completely wrong, but it was definitely exaggerated and like prettied up for the screen.
Interesting. Okay, let me just see these real quick. I'll learn Mandarin just in case. I don't want to say anything, but it is the way it's going. It's likely that China might take over the world. Just saying. It's because colonial history of the British, and there's definitely a tension between Hong Kong and mainland. Okay, that's fair enough. But yeah, that's that's fair enough. But yeah, on that note, I need to head out because I'm hoping to post a new video today. So we'll see. But thank you to everyone who was involved in the discussion. Thank you to you guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us, man.
Really appreciate it.
Retro, nice to meet you. I'll subscribe to your channel for sure.
Thank you.
But yeah, on that note, peace.
Right.